Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. This is going to be a pre-introduction. This video should go up on Thursday. It might go up for, Wednesday night because of the importance of the events that are unfolding. So I was talking about the flood and all the things to do with the flood. Just the flood, the hurricane, and then all these other things that are going down. My wife and I both were feeling like a little bit unsettled, and I covered Netanyahu. I mean, that's what you'll see in the beginning of this video, giving a message to the people of Iran. And then now Iran has launched missiles at Israel, and we're just waiting to find out if any of them hit. So MSNBC's Andrea Mitchell and CNN's Dana Bash, who are both very dour, somber, lifeless ghouls, were even more depressed than normal. And both of them, this is something where they were thinking World War III, because this is how that will work. We know when Iran drew the line in the sand with Syria, when America was trying to do its regime change in Syria, what it had done over all these other countries, and Russia said no. Russia said F you to America. They war blocked America and Syria. And since then, they have targeted Russia. The neocons, who are now running the Biden Defense Department, had targeted Russia, right? And these neocons have always wanted this war with Iran. They've had a hard on for Iran. I'll show you that maybe as this stuff progresses. I'll find the Wesley Clark, where he talked about how they had a idea of attacking 7 countries in 5 years doing regime change, and Iran was always the big one. Iran's the one they've always been after. They've wrecked Iran, the CIA. These neocons are now running the Biden administration foreign policy, and so there's that. Now, the pundits were talking about how Israel's really vulnerable, fighting wars on multiple fronts, and what's to stop Egypt going in? Israel's already had wars on different fronts before, and they have America's support. But I've said this before. I know America's collapsing. You kind of probably knows this. The world already knows this. That America's, reign of terror is pretty much over. Like being the empire, it's we know what's happening, right? And Israel's, what do they always say? Israel has the right to defend itself, right? And so what their side of the story is, Jewish people's side of the story, is that Jews have been persecuted all over the world. They're being bullied and persecuted, and they don't have a safe place, right? They're the minority in all these different countries, and they're hated across the world and have been for centuries, thousands of years, and people are always bullying them and mistreating them. Of course, the Holocaust being the big victim consciousness statement. This is, we're victims. And so their story is that they needed their own country, but they wanted a country where the people that hate them the most surround them in a very small country. And so the UN gave them this country, and they had to displace the Palestinian people, so that gave them another group. The Palestinian people had been pretty receptive, and they got along pretty well when it was called Palestine, and the Jews weren't being targeted then. Not like they were in other countries. The Palestinian people were pretty great about, the way they treated them. But as soon as it became Israel and Palestine, and Israel had the military advantage because they got all the support and monies from the Rothschild families and their relationship with America, that they started to beat the shit out of the Palestinians. That pissed off everyone around in those areas, and they're surrounded by people, Arab people, that they've been beefing for 3,000 years. It's their number one enemy. The Abraham, the difference between Ishmael and Isaac, his bastard son Ishmael, who was born from an Arab slave who later became the Muslim people, and Isaac, who was his natural born son from his wife, was a miracle child. And so ever since then, these two groups have been, having beef, having hatred for each other. And it's, riddled throughout the Old Testament. And we know about what's happened, recently in recent history. And so they put Israel smack dab in the middle of that conflict, biblical conflict, right? And, they say that they have the right to defend themselves. They have a right to be safe because they've never had that before. And that's what Israel's supposed to represent for them. And American politicians always say this, right? Israel has a right to defend itself. And so if their number one goal is to be safe and be in a situation where people can't attack them, their goal isn't to be friends with America, which prevents that. Their goal has to be America. Like they have to be the number one superpower. They have to be so threatening, and they have to basically subjugate all those other countries and people. They have to dominate the Muslim people, the Arab people. They have to do regime change in Iran. That's like part of their goal here. They have to do that in all these countries. If their goal is to be safe, then those countries have to bow down before Israel. And Israel needs to collect all those lands. So now if Israel sees that America is on its way out, and they've used America, shamelessly over, in terms of the relationship there, and they're not opposed to doing it again, then they have to draw America into this war, which I know is their goal here. And so that America goes and defeats all these other countries around there, and all that military supplies, all the stuff that we know we leave behind, right? All that stuff that America's going to have to mobilize, the stuff they left in Afghanistan and Iraq and Syria, all these, all the military equipment is going to go to Israel when the war is over. They're going to inherit, a huge part of America's military-industrial complex, and they will occupy all these oil-rich regions. This picture I have, if they get the what they think is the promised land, and Israel becomes the Israel of the Bible. That's what these Zionists also believe. These neocons are all Zionists, right? And Trump is the worst on Israel. Kamala is only slightly better because of the liberal people who are protesting Israel's genocide of the Palestinian people, right? But these Zionists are all pushing for this. And so their goal has always been this, and they want to make Israel into a superpower. And so if Israel's a superpower, at least on the level of America and China and Russia and these other places, of course, Russia would be taken down as well. And so their support of these other countries like Iran, that's what this war would result in. And Israel's just hell-bent on it. And they would have all these, they have access to all these ports. They'd have all this oceanfront property, as well as all the oil and natural gas that is there. And they would become, just in terms of their control of that region, they become the dominant force for all the oil in that region. And they would be like America within that region, right? And all these other countries would have to bow before them. So I said this when this first began. This is their last shot, because America's not going to be able to muster a war in 4 years. America's collapsing economically, but also in terms of, our proclivity for aggression and war is no longer, the way that our kids are growing up. Our kids are growing up, for lack of a better word, pussies, right? Like, I'm not, a big military person. I'm just saying the way things would be viewed in the past. Our kids are now much more sensitive. Our military is going to be a wreck. And, before we were always groomed for aggression through our sports and our culture. America was an aggressive place because we were supposed to defend Europe, right? NATO. We were America. We were the world's military, the white people's military, like for the European countries. In America, we were part of the British Empire, these European countries no longer have any taste for war. And America's kids are going to be like that. They're just over it, right? There's so long that a country, an empire can be aggressive and filled with people who are into fighting. There's no hunger here anymore. Everybody's entitled. They've gotten soft. And that just happens. And so, the moral decay, all the things that are happening, Israel knows as soon as America's no longer the superpower, that they're fucked. Like, they have nothing. They're completely vulnerable if they lose their, the big bully who's keeping all the people around them from not only just militarily, but financially, because, Saudi Arabia and these other countries in that region are all, oil-producing countries that have a connection financially to America and these other countries, European countries. And so Israel has to make their move like now. This is their last chance to go for being a superpower. Otherwise, Israel's going to be absorbed. And if their stated goal is to find a place to defend themselves, well, then they're going to have to do better than they are. They're in a very vulnerable position where the only thing that's keeping them from being absorbed by the other Arab countries in that region is America, which is collapsing, right? So, this is a very simple equation. And so even though on paper it doesn't look like it's good for them, they want a war with Iran. Like, they want it now. They've wanted it forever. And so does Trump. It's the one place that Trump has got a hard on for because he's completely owned by Israel, and that's his handlers, and whatever Kamala is or not. And so that's where this is headed. Like, they know this is their last chance. They know Trump will be all about it if he's elected. They know that they'll pressure whatever happens. This is what they're going to have to do. And so if they go to war with Iran, and Russia has a relationship, has alliances with Iran, then Russia's involved, and of course America's involved, and then America's at war with Russia, and there's just a matter of time. And this is 100% going to happen. Like, it's just, there's no way to avoid it. And so I get into how crazy it is just this last couple of weeks, last week particularly. You'll see in the beginning of the video, and I get into this interview that Kamala Harris did with the Basketball All the Smoke podcast, and I'm going to cover that a little bit, and then I'll get into the debate, which is going to change now. The first question of the debate is going to be about this. And everyone kind of knows this is where it's headed. Like, it's not, maybe there won't be, maybe it won't be war today, but it's just going to escalate. This is escalating. There's no peace there. Israel has never been, what peace deal has Israel ever made, right? They couldn't make a peace deal with the Palestinian people because they don't want it. They don't want peace with Iran, right? And so, Israel's not going to accept these things. And if Israel goes to war, America's going to have to go with them. I mean, that's just been America. If America said, fuck you, and just let them, let them do it themselves, then Israel would be absorbed. And, Israel has such power over America. It's like, there's no way this isn't going to happen. And so this is the beginning. And, these are predictions and prophecies and the whispers of the brighter world messages, which I'm going to read. As this thing escalates, I'll read all of them. The prophecies, and some of the other ones, there's a section called prophecies, but it's alluded to, and this stuff with the nuclear war is a part of it. Anyways, let's get into the regular video I already made. Again, that was from a couple days ago, and it all progresses to this, which, this pre-introduction about all the things I just said. Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. This is Sunday, September 29th, so I am working on a video today, which won't be up till Tuesday, so I assume this won't be up till Thursday. But I thought this was kind of important to kind of go with my introduction to my last video that'll be up on Tuesday about the soul and one's relationship with the soul. And then more on a sort of superficial level. When you understand that there is a shadow government, there's people behind the people that are in front of you. And most truthers kind of sense that or know that to some extent, right? There are people pulling the strings. There are people who are picking these candidates, and they are, they are controlling them. And those are the people with the real power, right? So everyone in the truth community flirts with these ideas, knows about these things. And yet people focus so much on these two candidates particularly, and then all the people who they put out in front of you. Whether it be Fauci, like you didn't know who Fauci was, and then you either love him and hate him based in your political leanings. Like the Democrats loved him, and the Republicans hated him, right? So you have people who just appear out of nowhere, like people didn't care about Kamala until she replaced Joe Biden. Like she barely was talked about. No one cared about her, but now she's the face of something. And now people are obsessed with her. But, just 3 months ago, people are obsessed with Joe Biden. No one's talking about, Let's Go Brandon anymore. That's dead. Like, let's say we did a whole Let's Go Brandon video, no one would watch it, right? Because they don't care. We've moved on. Because the people who control the system has replaced a front man with a front woman, and the whole thing with Trump is the same thing. So you have these people that they put out in front of you who have no real power. And the majority of Americans, even people who aren't truthers, get a sense that there are people behind the throne. The power's behind the throne. There are people who, these two candidates particularly, but candidates in general, they're very superficial. Like, I don't know a politician. You might say RFK Jr. believes in like the environment. Maybe maybe he believes in something. Like maybe I mean, for him, it's definitely he's a desperate person. Like he's got this desperation inside of him. It needs to be seen, right? And there's that. But maybe he believes a little bit in what he says. I mean, at least partially. But these other candidates, they'll say whatever they need to say to get elected. So they don't have a mission. They're not, visionary people. They're not people who have. They're being elected so they can implement some sort of policies. Like they always have these backstories of what makes them tick, right? When they get up close and personal with these candidates. And they have these stories of why they ran for president. And they're always like BS, right? They're always, not true. Like Biden said it was about Charlottesville. They have some motivating story. Like Kamala Harris says, one of her best friends was assaulted, and she wanted to become a prosecutor. Like stupid stuff like that, right? It's not real, right? It's not authentic, but they want you to think that they believe in something, that something happened to them when they were younger, or certain things happened to them, and they bring in these people with their stories at the conventions of who they're fighting for, and all these things. In my last video, there's a woman who Kamala locked up because of sickle cell anemia. Her daughter had that, and she missed some school, and Kamala had that truancy thing, and she locked her up, right? These kind of stories now that's a story for Trump, to demean Kamala. Like they have all these stories, but just like Trump threw the Haitian people under the bus, they don't care about anybody, right? They're using people for a political agenda. Trump doesn't care about immigration. Kamala doesn't care about, people getting offended, or this girlfriend, a friend that she talked about that was assaulted. They don't care about any of this stuff, right? They don't. They don't care. They don't have they don't have a passion. Their passion is their narcissism and, the craving power and position, and also just winning and being out in front of people. Like they like being out in front of people. They like public speaking. They like the energy from the audience, and they like everyone to see that they're successful. It's superficial. Like Trump is just, he's not really financially successful. He's a con man, but he likes the bling. He likes the people to think he has such a great life. He wants to be known as that. That's why he did The Apprentice, all these things, right? He wants to be seen as some successful guy. It's important to be seen. It's important to be famous, right? They're more about fame. And so they will do whatever. This is why they're chosen. They'll do whatever their handlers tell them to do. And they're completely compromised. Like they've done things, all these people, like Joe Biden, he's got Hunter Biden they can hold. Anytime they wanted, they could have put Hunter Biden in jail and exposed his corruption, right? They have things at every one of these people. And if they don't go along, they can take them down at any time. Trump has a lifelong of criminal behavior and things like this. And so they pick these people because, one, all they care about is the fame. They don't have a passion, and they don't care how you treat other people. Like they don't care what the things their policies do to other people. That's why they pick these specific people for presidency or being, senators or whatever. They're handpicked because they know that they'll do whatever they're told to do. They'll push through whatever they're told to do. And so why not focus on the controllers? Well, why not focus on the people who are behind them in the shadows? And, most people know there are people there. People know there are handlers. I mean, even the most sheeple sheeple know this, right? So why not focus on the people calling the shots? Because next to nothing about these people, because they don't want the fame. They don't have, first of all, we don't even know who these people are. There's theories like the families, the Rothschilds and the Rockefeller families. Yeah, that's part of it. There's really wealthy families. Yeah, there's that. People talk about these councils, like a council of 12 or something that, has these, decisions they make, or, however the structure is. People don't even know. We don't know what it is. We have no idea. We get dosed with Kamala and Trump. Every day we get Trump and Kamala thrown in our face, right? because they're like a shield for these people who are really calling the shots, right? They're just put out there in front of you. And you react to these puppets. People react to these puppets like these puppets have real power, and they don't, right? They have whatever power they're given, and as long as they have the kind of power you have, as long as you do what the people with power, with real power, want you to do, then you have this power that's taken away from you in a moment's notice. But you have these people in the shadows who they don't have social media profiles. They don't have information you can gather about them. I mean, they have very hidden lives. Even the royal family, there's next to nothing that you know about these people. They have now these are people who are out in front of people, the royal family, but they have the scandals they put out there, but they're not real. Like, the only real scandal you see was with Prince Andrew and Jeffrey Epstein, and that would involve America. And Prince Andrew paid a woman $12 million that he abused, and he said he was just doing it to stop it. Like he didn't admit to anything. But they made that scandal go away by the Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's debacle. And you have these people called the firm who really run the royal family. Tell them what to do, manage them, right? All these things. And, the people in the firm, you don't know who they are. Like, people know, like, there's these positions, but they never get focused on. And then there's the people behind them that you don't even know their names, right? And so there's a lot of anonymous people that are living lives of power and influence that you know nothing about. And they hire these basically, actors to do their bidding that receive all the, like shields of receiving all the negativity. And so why even focus on Kamala Harris and Trump? Like, I do it to mock them, but I know they have no real power. And I know that the people behind them, if I made videos about those people, like if I could find out, and I'm not going to because I don't give a shit, right? Because it's not, it's meaningless to do so, because I know that spirituality in terms of the divine laws and the godly principles and the godly ways of things, the divine ways of things, these people who have power eventually will be taken away. First of all, people die, and they have ways of retaining the power. They've had, these ways. But that's, it's short-lived. Eventually, the power will be taken away because it just has to be. Like, that's what happens, right? The power is removed from them because, it is, right? Like, it's what happens, right? It's what happens to people who are in power, like groups of people. The system comes down, the system has collapsed in which they had the power, and everything is wiped away. And then people will do the same shit over again when, the opportunity presents itself, depending on what yuga is. But in reality, it's just, everything that you get on planet Earth is transitory. You have limited time here, and whatever, you have in terms of success and influence and fame and fortune, it goes away. Like, when you die, it goes away. And you can pass it on, but, hope that you can reclaim it in a future life. But it's, you've been miserable anyway. Like, your soul at some point realizes, yeah, I wasn't happy when I had, like, these people aren't happy. These people aren't living life the way it's supposed to be. And they're not going in the direction their soul wants them to go. They're not following their soul's path. They're disconnected from their souls. And so there's consequences for all that shit. They're people, they're lesser than. They're not people to aspire to, you could get rid of the power structure, and then there'd be a vacuum and other people would fill those positions. You could get rid of the people. You could take the people down. You could get rid of them, find out who they are, and they just redo it, or the whole system would collapse. Like, the only way you can get them is to collapse the whole system, and then everybody suffers, right? And so the whole thing is like, it's pointless. It's pointless to even think about it. You just have to know, basically, this is what's happening. There's people in the shadows who are calling the shots, and that there's no real, consequence to your voting. And they themselves can't control everything. And so inevitably, the system's going to collapse from its depravity, because it has to, because it's a bad system. It's taking people in the wrong direction, right? And so the fact that these people don't have any presence, like, you don't even know their names, never mind can do research on them. and find out what makes them tick individually and what their agenda is. You can only figure out their agenda from looking at what's going on in the world, right? Like you can think about, what do they get from Trump? Well, Trump is divisive. So they've used Trump for the past 8 years to divide America. And we're more divided than ever. So that means that they're going to, dividing and conquering is going to happen, that America's going to suffer something, right, in terms of being conquered in a way that we're, no longer going to be the main focal point of the empire. The empire's power is going to shift, maybe to China, maybe to, who knows, Israel, whatever it might be. But America is going to suffer because when you divide a country, when you divide a family, when you divide a company, one of my managers when I waited tables said, I just need one waiter, one of the people on the wait staff to get a bad attitude, and I got to fire the whole staff. Because one person starts complaining and pointing out how the job sucks, and all the other people start to, feel that. I worked in another restaurant where I'm going in on my first day, and one waitress said, oh, you should quit right now. This place is a nightmare. Like she said, right in front of other people. And they fired her, and they called me into the office and say, oh, we fired that person, and she was disgruntled. I'm like, Jesus Christ, this is not a way to start. But I mean, I didn't know how good or bad the place was, but it's already contaminated with negativity, right? You see this with teams. You see this with championship teams, right? They win a few championships, and then people get their egos, they get their entitlements, right? They stop doing the hard work, and they don't have the hunger for it anymore. Their egos clash with each other. They start being jealous of each other and things, and they fall apart. Because when you divide something, it always is going to fail. You need people to work together to be successful, right? And so with Trump, they're dividing the country, and Kamala is going to be divisive. I mean, the country's already been divided, and they have these unlikable people. And so that's something that they're going to do. Like America is going down. Like we can all sense that they're destroying America in various ways. The people behind, the power behind the throne. And so to think that Kamala or Joe Biden is destroying America and that Trump can save it, it's just stupid. It's silly. Right? Why would they give you an option to save something when they have an agenda? Like whatever their agenda is, it involves Americans and Americans' lifestyle suffering. Like America isn't going to be what it was in the past. And this idea that, we're going to make America great again is simply, America was never great and all that kind of stuff. But they're not going to give you back the way it was in the 80s or 90s or wherever Trump wants to take it back to when he and his followers thought that America was in their glory days. They're not. That's not going back, right? Your lifestyle isn't going to get better. There's clearly something going on to take America down. The immigration issue, all of it, the economy, all the things that are going on, the massive amounts of debt, right? Like America's going to have to suffer. They're going to have to move the power to somewhere else. America's going to have to, there's all these promises. Americans think they are owed these promises, right? Social Security, Medicaid, all the things that people think they have, their retirement plans, right? Their pensions, all this money that they think they're owed. We're talking about trillions and trillions of dollars that Americans think that they're going to be entitled to collectively, that they can't pay out, that they can't deliver on that. And so it's going to be a race like it never existed, either through inflation or just taking money out of people's bank accounts and all those types of things, right? The stocks, the bonds, the money in your bank accounts, any kind of precious metal, cryptocurrency, it's just an illusion. You think you have wealth, until you have it in your hands, even physical currency is going to be worthless, right? So until you have something physical in you have land, which they can take away. You don't even own the land. It's like you're leasing it from the American corporation. They can take it away. They take people's land away from them all the time. So you really don't own anything they can't take, right? It's the illusion of ownership. It's based in a system that says it's okay to get an abortion. They don't have the right to do that. They don't own the land. Nobody owns the land, right? The land is itself something you have to fight for. animals every day are competing and fighting for territory because it's just something you have to fight for it, and you only have it until like something bigger comes, or a storm, like all these storms that just happened, the whole hurricane. Everything can be wiped out. Your house can be taken off. Anything can happen, right? Your house can become unlivable. And so everything is transitory. You never can hold anything and make sure you can keep it. Everything you have is, it's limited to your lifetime, but, oftentimes things are taken away from you before you die, including power. There's nothing here that's you can permanently hold on to. And a promise of this, that you can have what have forever, is a lie, right? This idea that, America's too big to fail, these banks or whatever. The country, the institutions, the governments, the power structure, all these things are meant to fade away. Like power is supposed to be, see how it is in nature, right? You have these, lions are supposed to be the kings of the beasts, right? And they come in, and they have a pride, and, a couple of male lions and whatever, one male lion. And then some younger lions come up and beat the shit out of that guy and take over the pride. It happens. They have these, these documentary animal things where they show you this, right? Like none of it is something that could be, held on to, right? None of it is permanent. And so, like this, it's silly to look at this election like it means something, because even if these were people had power, which they don't, it's transitory, right? The president lasts for 4 years, 8 years at most, and 2 of those years being the lame duck. They have to, bargain with and cajole the Senate and the Congress to pass laws. They have some executive order powers, but the reality is that they are handled and managed by people in the shadows who you don't know where they are, who have an agenda, and they want you to focus on this distraction, which it is, to make it seem like you have a choice and some say in your, government, which you don't, and some control over your life, which you don't, right? And that you could debate with people and, talk about this, like just like with sports or anything else, like it means something, like it's something to talk about, right? Like just a distraction to keep you away from the fact that you're being taken in the wrong direction spiritually, and you're a slave without even knowing you're a slave, right? Your slavery is your bonds are self-inflicted, that you're keeping yourself a slave by going along with, you have to go along with the system. You have to earn money. You have to do these things. And they control all these things. And in terms of the truth community, like people thought the truth community could wake everybody up. And, if you look at the degradation that's set in, the degraded aspect of our system, the people in our system, the moral degradation and how divided everybody is and how worse off it is, the idea that you could wake people up and inform them of the truth, because this very simple truth that most people kind of have a sense that Donald Trump and Kamala Harris have people that handle them. Everyone kind of knows that. Everyone knows that there's power behind the throne, like I said earlier. And yet, nothing has been done. There's no interest in that, right? And so the truth, in the truth community has been used to divide people. The whole social media, all of the internet, and control people even more. People are more controlled now than ever because they have all these things on the internet they like to do, the things they like to do with your computer, video games, all of that. People addicted to all this stuff. People are addicted to their screens, to their phones, to their computers, to all these things. Kids grow up spending 10 hours a day in an alternative reality. And so whatever information that can be given, or whatever information that's out there, whatever truth that's available now that wasn't available before, it still doesn't have an effect. Like the major effect of the internet has been bad, right? So the idea that people can get information and connect with something real, people don't want that shit, right? People don't want, something, that connect with their souls. And like I said in the other video, they don't want, everyone can connect with their soul right now. They could be doing that already, right? The majority of people have no interest in that, no interest in God, no interest in anything other than superficial shit, which the internet is full of, right? 1/3 of the internet is porn. Like, that's all you need to know. Like that's 1/3 of it. Like, we already know there's so much crap out there on social media. I mean, majority of social media is disinformation. And then there's just celebrity gossip and celebrity shit and all the stuff that's there, right? And so how much of the internet's useful information, right? Like it's a small percentage. And people dabble in that. Oh, I learned something useful today. Now let me watch something meaningless. People's intention goes to meaningless, addictive stuff that's just a distraction from the fact that they're going in the wrong direction. Humanity is, and each person personally. And the internet isn't solving that. Like a few people use the internet correctly to find things about self-improvement. They find truths. They have epiphanies. They evolve as people. They find, like real people, they find real, solutions and things. And they become better people. But how many people is that, you think? Like, honestly. I mean, it's single digits, right? It's the majority of people the internet has a negative effect on. The very few people that the internet has a positive effect on. And 5G and 4G hurts all of us. So it's just, like the whole thing is just a joke, right? The whole fucking thing is just a joke. Anyways, let's get into the other stuff here. Okay, let's start here. This is Monday, September 30th. So I did the voiceover on Saturday. This video won't be out till Thursday. I already have a video up that'll go out on Tuesday. This video, I will cover the vice presidential debate if I cover it. I mean, I'm sure I'll cover some of it. I just, it'll be hard to get through most of that. But today we're going to start off with Apocalyptic Monday, even though you're watching this on Thursday. And one of my viewers sent me this. This is the guy, Terrell J. Daggett, about the Longshoreman union going on strike and what that'll mean. And that's just about to happen. I'm going to cover a little bit of the hurricanes, specifically in Asheville, North Carolina, because that's interesting. And then there is a message from Netanyahu to the Iranian people. So we're getting into the apocalypse deep into it now. Things are starting to unravel. And so let's start with this guy here.
I want a piece of that for my men, because when they made their most money was during COVID.
Okay, let's go back a little bit here.
Always fighting.
Why do you think you haven't had to strike since then?
Because you had leaders like me, and the companies got smart and said, we don't want to go through another 3 months strike. Let's negotiate in good faith. Back then, the companies didn't make the money that we make today. So we negotiated in good faith. We went with 6-year contracts. And we got $1 raise, $1.50 raise for 6 years. It was great. It was a lot of money compared to 80 cents for 3 months. But today's world, it's changing into the future. They're not making millions no more. They're making billions. And they're spending it fast as they make it. I want a piece of that for my men, because when they made their most money was during COVID. When my men had to go to work on those piers every single day, when everybody stayed home and went to work. Not my men. They died out there with the virus. We all got sick with the virus. We kept them going. From Canada to Maine to Texas, Great Lakes, Puerto Rico, now the Bahamas, everybody went to work during COVID. Nobody stayed home. Well, I want to be compensated for that. I'm not asking for the world. They know.
So everyone else wanted to be out in the world, so I'm not sure what's happening with that COVID thing. But what he's saying, they made the most money. These companies made the most money during COVID, which is kind of shocking since everything, I guess maybe because the prices went up because of the shortages. I don't know. But he's saying these companies made all that money. They're billions of dollars, and he wants his longshoremen to have a piece of this, right? And, I don't understand that point of view. But in terms of them not getting compensated Well, these companies, the tax revenues are up and prices are up because of inflation. And so there could be that, right? That's probably more appropriate to the situation because of all the prices going up because inflation's going up. So they need a cost of living raise. Like I could understand that. But either way, that's what he's saying is going to happen here.
What I want, they know what I want, and if they don't, well, then I have to go into the street and we have to fight for what we rightfully deserve.
Do you think, this is my last question, do you think the threat of the strike is they can understand the significance of that based on the recent things that have happened, like our Key Bridge, we're from Maryland, our Key Bridge collapsing and it just stopping all the ships from being able to deliver?
I'm glad you brought that up, because I would like to tell you something.
Okay.
When that bridge fell, my longshoremen are on this side of the bridge, no work, no salaries. Biden called me up on the phone, President Biden. Harold, I got the money to build a new bridge. I go, oh. What about my longshoremen? They're out of work now. They didn't cause no problem. Well, he goes, I got the money for building a new bridge and getting the bridge that's in the water out of there. I ask you one more time, President, what about the men whose families now have no money coming in? Well, if there was an explosion on a ship, maybe I can get the money. Listen, you're supposed to be a friend of the ILA. You came to me.
So he's throwing Biden under the bus here.
When you wanted the AFL CIO backing, I got it for you. You called me in the kitchen, you thanked me 1,000,000 times. I'm telling you, my members need help. Well, let me see what I can do. In politics, that means you're not getting it, okay? I opened up a fund with management after the first pandemic. Let me see how much money's in that fund. I called them up. They called me back. $300 million. Wow, are you kidding me? We put $300 million in there? Yeah. Well, I'd like to take some money out of there and pay for those families in Baltimore. Well, Harold, it's only for pandemic. Well, what about we get your lawyers and my lawyers, and any disaster, nature disaster, whatever, we can draw from it. I have no problem as long as the lawyers work it out. They worked it out in one day. It cost me $1.2 million every week to pay for their families. Plus, they were allowed to go to unemployment. And it's over now. They're back working. The ships are going in and out. I never got no help from the government. We did it on our own, management and union. That's what we're supposed to be doing, working together. And I hope we get back into that right realm.
Do you think
that was in Baltimore?
Right.
What was the question again?
Well, it was just about I remember how significantly it impacted our businesses, like the supply chain, because I live on the Chesapeake Bay, and all the ships were just waiting on the other side.
Let me explain something to you. These people today don't know what a strike is.
Right.
So this is the important piece.
When my men hit the streets, from Maine to Texas, every single port will lock down. You know what's going to happen? I'll tell you. First week, be all over the news every night, boom, boom. Second week, guys who sell cars can't sell cars because the cars ain't coming in off the ships. They get laid off. Third week, malls start closing down. They can't get the goods from China. They can't sell clothes. They can't do this. Everything in the United States comes on a ship. They go out of business. Construction workers get laid off because the materials aren't coming in. The steel's not coming in. The lumber's not coming in. They lose their job. Everybody's hating the longshoremen now because now they realize how important our jobs are. Now I have the president screaming at me, I'm putting a Taft-Hartley on you. Go ahead. Taft-Hartley means I have to go back to work for 90 days. That's a cooling off period. Do you think when I go back for 90 days, those men are going to go to work on that pier? It's going to cost the company's money to pay their salaries. Well, they went from 30 moves an hour maybe to 8. They're going to be like this. Who's going to win here in the long run? You're better off sitting down and let's get a contract and let's move on with this world. And in today's world, I'll cripple you. I will cripple you, and you have no idea what that means. No.
Okay, so that was 3 weeks ago. And this is all of the stuff here. Dock workers threatening to strike is some of the biggest ports in America. That's 22 hours ago, 2 days ago. And so now it's looming. And it's coming at a bad time post-hurricane because a lot of these states are really fucked by the hurricane. They're just, let's go to to Asheville.
In just 8 hours, dock workers up and down the East Coast and along the Gulf are set to go on strike. Negotiations have stalled between the Longshoremen's Union and the employers. There are no plans for those talks to continue.
Okay, so we'll get to Asheville in just a moment. I've already edited this video. It's 4 o'clock, and at whatever the end of this program was on MSNBC, I do a cold bath, and I lift some free weights to get my blood pressure up, my body heat up before I go in the tub. And I turned on the news, and they were talking about this. And so this is, mainstream media covering this. So today, whatever, the 30th of September, these dock workers are going to go on strike, how this is going to affect the election, how this is going to affect people suffering from the hurricane. It's the worst ports, all the important ports for these states that are suffering right now.
Almost half of all U.S. imports are at stake. Billions of dollars in goods that could get stuck in transit. Joining us now, NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Romans. This is not good, Christine.
No.
So what do the dock workers want?
They want more money and less automation. Automation at the gates and the trucks and the ports basically can put some of these guys out of work. So they're trying to preserve their way of life, but they want more money. And the union boss basically said that the last offer from the port owners and shippers was insulting. He said, so here we are. Everyone thinks they're going to strike at midnight.
And the White House, have they said whether they're going to get involved in this? They did get involved to negotiate a deal with the rail workers. This would be a big deal in the election if suddenly the supply chain was cut off again.
Timing is just incredible here.
Yeah, that's how leverage works, right? This isn't an accident. They picked the best time for them to strike, the worst time for these big corporations.
They have talked to both sides. They're talking to both sides. They're urging them to get back to the bargaining table. They want collective bargaining. They think that's the best and fairest thing for everybody. But also the White House pointing out that they want a deal that is fair and commensurate with the huge profits of these big shipping companies. So the White House saying they're not going to get in there and break the strike at this point.
It's also an interesting moment because union workers have been so successful in the last couple of years. They've really made inroads against major corporations and cemented a living wage, cemented some pensions in some case, health care. They've made a lot of good deals. Is this the feeling from the dock workers that now is the moment? Because the public opinion is also on their side.
They have a lot of leverage here. Now, these are much higher paid workers than a lot of different of those industries that we're talking about, but they have a lot of leverage here because if they don't show up to work, suddenly half of the imports of the United States can't get unloaded. Like right now, you have all these ports up and down the East Coast and the Gulf Coast. You can see them there, where there are literally lines of trucks trying to get the last loads out of there while they still can.
So you have the election, you have Christmas coming, and you have these places suffering from a recent hurricane, and maybe possibly more hurricanes coming, right? There's still the season. And so if you look at those ports, I mean, certainly Savannah maybe being the biggest one, Jacksonville and Charlottesville and Wilmington, North Carolina, and these places, but all of those ports will be bringing things into those places. And again, these places are stripped bare right now, especially with produce and things like that. Some of that stuff's coming from America, but some of it's imported. And so, it's going to be a disaster for those reasons.
And when I look at, the dollar value of containers coming in and out of these ports over the last week, it spiked. Why? Because they're rushing, trying to get this stuff out.
It's also, this is stuff that's coming in for the holiday season. So this would really hurt businesses on their holiday ledgers.
So the retailers tell us they saw this coming, and so they have been actually front-loading a lot of that holiday stuff so that they have it. What it really hurts is a small business owner or a small factory owner who's got a part on a ship in the ocean and is watching it and is not going to get here in time, and then they have to shut down maybe an assembly line or something while they wait for a part to come. So those are the kind of knock-ons. A short shutdown we can get over pretty quickly. Every day it's shut down, maybe 5 days to catch up. But the longer you go, that's when the economic damage starts to pile up.
So real important to know, one day of shutdown equals 5 days to catch up for that shutdown. So, I mean, we already had the issues with this stuff to do with, I guess we should all go buy toilet paper again, like canned goods and, whatever it is, right? I mean, that's what it's coming down to. And so, and what's going to happen to people panicking like they did before during COVID. All right, so let's go to Asheville here. I mean, that's, that area is just, there's so many areas that have really suffered from the hurricane.
Tonight, Western North Carolina is reeling from Hurricane Helene's deadly wrath.
Oh my God.
And desperately waiting for help. In the city of Asheville, streets are still underwater, neighborhoods unrecognizable.
Oh my God.
Some people kayaking to safety. This home completely surrounded by rushing water.
Okay, so I have a connection to Asheville. My family and I stayed in near Lake Juneau, for 3 or 4 months. And the preceptor, I do this Sajmark meditation. There was a preceptor there at Asheville. So my family and I went there every Sunday, and we would get group meditation, and then we'd go and do something in the area. Kind of a cool town, a lot of very new agey, very liberal, and it's mostly on a mountain, like it's a mountainous area. But there are a lot of rivers and valleys, and those rivers and valleys can't support the water. Then my family and I, we camped for like 3 months. We just went across various parts of the southeast, starting in. There is a mountainous area called the Pisgah Mountains, and it was June we started camping, and hot. You'd think in the south there, North Carolina, but the first time we were camping, we had torrential rains, like just brutal rains. They got a lot of rainfall there, and everything was flooded. My son we got a really big tent for my kids. 4 kids were sleeping in this huge tent. It had like 3 different rooms, like little rooms there. And my son, we also had like one of those hammocks, my youngest son, and he set up the hammock to sleep outside. And in the middle of the night, he had a carabiner in his pocket or whatever. He had this, he was carrying a carabiner that I must have given him or something. And he was about 10 years old. I think he was about 10, 9 or 10. And he got some cordage and used the carabiner, and he made a line across the 2 trees where the hammock was and found a tarp and put the tarp on, and he was able to sleep. I was like, I thought he would just go back to the big tent because it was just pouring. And we came out, and the whole campground was flooded. It was cold. Like, we could see our breath. It was like 40 degrees in June, and we were not, like, prepared for that level of cold. But we had a good time up there, great trails, beautiful place. And then from there, we started heading towards the coast in North Carolina, and we went through all these areas, and where the water flows, like from, the Pisgah Mountains all the way down to the North Carolina shoreline, right, where this water flows through North Carolina and South Carolina, these rivers that make it to the ocean. Kind of interesting. We didn't plan it that way, but it's a whole homeschooling thing that we did. But this is, an area where it's, my wife was pointing out, it's a smart city. Really, one of these real liberal, progressive kind of, 15-minute city type of things they're trying to do there. And, the same thing happened with the flooding in Chennai, India when I was there, where they just flooded people out. And then they just took over their homes and then, turned it into, it was the river area in Chennai, India, where, thousands of people died and were displaced. They opened up the floodgates, and then they were building call centers and corporate things along the river, the nice river areas, right? And so that's what looks like it's happening here. But the thing about it is North Carolina is fairly inland, right? It's from the east side, I think it's 6 hours away, 5 hours away from the ocean. Like you head, directly from North Carolina to the ocean, it's 5 or 6 hours away, driving, whatever that is, a couple 100 miles, 300 miles, something, I don't know. And then, from Florida, it's quite a ways away, right? So where the hurricane came ashore.
Chief Meteorologist Chris Holcomb. And Chris, this is that time we are getting closer to, our area really feeling the greater impacts of this storm.
And that's what we've been talking about all night, talking about the later we get into these.
So let's go to here, right? So So it came up the Gulf of Mexico coast here.
After 11 o'clock, the official landfall. But look how fast it is moving here up to the north. In just a little bit, this center of the circulation is going to cross over the Georgia-Florida line and start moving through Georgia very quickly. We told you about...
So Georgia got hammered, South Carolina. But North Carolina, let me show you this set of picture. So the hurricane came up through here, turned into a Category 4, and made landfall here in Florida. And the outside of the hurricane was hitting here, this area in Georgia, South Carolina, and, you know, the east side coast of Florida. And that was storm surge and whatever. But then the hurricane goes the length of Georgia. If you've been to Georgia, I mean, Florida is a very long state. When you're driving, you know, my family used to drive all the way from Connecticut through all these states. You know, this is where the area where I live, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, little bits of Georgia here. And then you go through Florida. And so if you're going down the coast, it's not a big deal. But when you go from the top of Georgia to the bottom, it's almost as long as Florida, right? And so it goes the length of Georgia, and then it is hitting here in North Carolina, this area right here, right? This is where Asheville is. And so it got all this rain and things dumped on it, just the sort of tail end. You know, the outer parts of the hurricane is where, like, lots of the rain is. But this is a very mountainous area. And so you think about that far inland, because usually when you hear about, like, damage, it's the coastal areas, right? When hurricanes hit, it hits the coast the hardest, the storm surge, and most of those areas are basically at sea level. And so they flood really easily. When there's a storm surge, like, all those houses get flooded, some will get washed out to the ocean, and we've seen what happens with that kind of level of push of water, and all this water gets dumped on the coast. And then the hurricane goes inland and turns into a tropical storm, and it's not as bad. But after going the whole length of Georgia, it hit North Carolina here and, you know, just devastated this place. And I don't know if they strengthened it here with some sort of, you know, that scalar square that, you know, that, I don't know if you guys seen any of those older videos. That guy Dutch Sense used to make them. Yeah, I don't know that much about it. Those, you know, energy weapons to fortify a storm. I don't know if that's done intentionally. So let's go back to the video here.
We were there when water rescues got underway. Days after Helene, the River Arts District remains underwater. Everything here a complete loss. Just more devastation on top of tragedy.
I want to remind all North Carolinians that conditions on the ground remain extremely dangerous, even as flooding has continued.
Alyssa Smith's only lifeline during the storm, her Jeep.
We weren't prepared for the severity of the storm at all.
Today, the first signs of...
The reason they're not prepared is because these places don't get hit this hard. Like, the storm doesn't go all the way up the, you know, the length of Georgia and then hit inland in a mountainous area. I mean, the mountains of North Carolina catch a lot of rainfall. You know, there's a big mountain range there. And then it starts heading downward towards where you get to the coasts of North and South Carolina, then going down the other way through Georgia, right? But they don't get this kind of rainfall. And when you're on a mountainous area, the water just drains, right? The mountain rolls down. The mountains don't themselves flood. It goes down to the lower levels. That's how water works. It always goes, you know, it seeks the lowest level and then goes into the creeks and the rivers and things. And those all, you know, they can't handle all the water, so they flood. But, you know, there's more than just that. So there's massive power outage in that area in South Carolina and Georgia and, you know, Florida, things like that. And it's multiple states. And, like, these states aren't prepared. You know, when you cross out of Tennessee and you go to North Carolina, when you go to Asheville, it's like not a great road. It's mountain pass, and it, you know, and there's always construction on those roads, and it's like a tight area to drive through. And so there's like some of these roads and the ability to get trucks in there. And of course, all those things. You know, they have a big port there in Savannah, Georgia, where all the stuff is coming in, and so you know they're not getting the stuff there. They're not getting the stuff that they need, right? And so, you know, all of those things. And, you know, Amazon packages, there's no food, there's no power, you know, people are running out of food. It's a hard area to reach with emergency stuff and personnel. So if you add a strike to that, a longshoreman strike, this stuff will never, like, you know, I mean, there'll be I mean, horrible stuff. They'll be like, cannibal. I mean, it's just going to get bad quickly. Like, this is really getting apocalyptic. The combination of those two things, right? Because, just to build these areas back up and get everyone power again, get all the stores filled, and, people are, I mean, if you're out of power and you had a lot of food in your freezer, it's all, destroyed now, things like that.
Relief making their way into town, residents lining up, desperate for resources. Some people waiting up to 30, 40 minutes in line for a chance to get some cash at one of the few working ATMs in all of Asheville. Others, like James Workman and Jeannie Adair, beginning to get frustrated with the government's response to the catastrophe. At this point, you don't see a FEMA station set up, right?
That's right. And we should.
We should have by now.
Yeah.
You need FEMA? Like, when you're begging for FEMA.
Concerning?
Yeah, I mean, we expect more and we can't get out.
Down in Florida, residents continuing to assess the damage after taking a direct hit from Helene. In Cedar Key, business owners trying to salvage what's left of their stores.
What Mother Nature can do and the damage is just, it's incredible.
Yeah, and also enhanced by human technology.
Back in Asheville, a community picking up the pieces and preparing for the long road to recovery.
So when you're looking at this, whether you want to attribute it to Mother Nature, you want to attribute it to climate change or global warming, or if you want to attribute it to energy weapons, to weather weapons, any of those things, it doesn't matter. It's the breaking of America. Like, that's what you see across the board. They want to break America. Like, America, whether it's God doing it or it's, I mean, it's always God. If something's happened, God is a part of it, right? And then, the powers that be or whatever, where America gets crippled. When that, remember there was a hack on the refineries? My wife and I were driving through. We drove through the Asheville area, and that's where we found that the most gas stations were closed. Like, people were filling gas when there were gas stations that were open. There was one guy in front of me filling those practically clear white plastic garbage bags, like the thinnest possible garbage bags, like the cheapest ones with gas, like not even like the hefty long bags, like 30 gallons of gas in a bag, and he had it in the back of his like hatchback car, right? Like, that was, I mean, there was all those gas shortages. So this is an area where it just seems like when this kind of thing hits, it's going to be hard to, rebuild and get in there. Like, if you're by the coast, it's a lot easier to access. But like that guy said, there's only a few roads. There's one big highway that goes to the mountains through Tennessee and then into Asheville. So coming from that way. And then all the other devastation that's there in the coastal areas.
This is the worst thing ever?
It is the worst thing ever. I don't know if we can rebuild or be able to come back from this.
George is joining us.
Well, somebody will, because they can buy all that land for cheap, right? And then turn this into this. It's a very liberal city. I mean, it's a very, probably the most liberal part of North Carolina.
Now from Asheville. And George, we're just learning President Biden is set to make a trip to the region.
Yeah, that's right, Hallie. Late word from the
it's better already.
White House that President Biden will visit Helene-impacted areas as long as it doesn't impede with search and recovery efforts. And on that note, you're taking a live look at where water rescues have been ongoing. We've seen teams there on boats looking through what used to be rooftops and cars, seeing if they can find anyone. But tonight...
See, this is a river. So you can see there's a river. Like, there's the hills here, right? And then this is a valley where the river runs through it. And you can see this in these areas, any mountainous area. There's a place where the water runs, and then it goes down at the bottom of the mountain. There's going to be rivers, and those rivers can only hold so much water, and they got pulverized. There's a river in Tennessee called the French Broad River, and whenever my wife and I drive through that area, there's just a massive. I mean, it's a massive river. It looks like a lake. It's one of the bigger rivers I've seen, and that I heard was above capacity. So.
The big question for so many in this community is when that federal help will get here on the ground. Hallie?
So this is where the French Broad River is, it's close to the Nashville area. And so, this is not a good indication of where you see it in Tennessee. But it's a massive river. And it's, the area can only hold so many gallons of water. So here's a little bit more from somebody here.
I really don't think y'all understand how bad it is in the Southeast right now. We have towns that don't exist anymore.
Chimney Rock is gone. The city of Asheville is cut off from the world. This is not an exaggeration. All the bridges leading into the city have been washed away. They have no food, no power, no water, no internet, no cell service. They don't even have radio. It's a complete dead zone. No one knows what's going on in there. I don't think I'm being dramatic when I say that this is a Hurricane Katrina level event. There was a woman in my town who called for an ambulance, and the ambulance got stranded. And they were stranded for 24 hours, and to my knowledge, the patient didn't make it.
Okay, so this is going on. So then somebody sent me this as well.
A friend of mine posted my last video on Facebook, so I'm just repeating it here on TikTok just to get the word out.
I-40 through Tennessee would be heading towards Asheville.
TA in Denmark, Tennessee had 50 trucks with slashed tires. 50 trucks with slashed tires. That's on I-40 through Tennessee. Exit 126 in Holiday, Tennessee. Loves had 5 trucks. One guy had 9 tires slashed. And exit 163 at the Loves in Dixon, Tennessee, there were 16
That's not very loving.
trucks with tires slashed. So if y'all are traveling through that area, avoid those truck stops. Try not to stay overnight in those truck stops as of now. They've got authorities working on what's going on, and it's some kind of an activist group that is doing this. So y'all be careful, be safe out there.
Yeah, so that's it's probably some. I mean, they must want to really break that area. So I want to talk about all the things we just saw. I just want to show you this one thing from Netanyahu and his message to the Iranian people. But my wife sent me this, and then we talked about this morning. And what activist group would slash tires at a Love's gas station? They have these big gas stations along the highway. Of course, Buc-ee's the biggest one, except people don't, they don't have a place for truckers there. But they have these big gas stations where truckers go and sleep, right? And, rest stops, they have these areas, and, where truckers can go sleep for, you want truckers sleeping because, you don't want them not sleep, going on no sleep and taking, speed or caffeine pills or something. That's where it gets dangerous. Trucker falling asleep is a disaster. But they're sleeping at Love's, and people are cutting their tires, according to this guy. And if that's actually happening, what activist group would do that? And they would claim it. They would say, we're doing this. For what reason? When those trucks, I-40 is going to Asheville area, and so, it has to go through those mountain passes and these things. And so if they're doing that there, and in this area where there's already, difficulties, at a time, when you need supplies, and they're also about to go on strike there, in terms of the longshoremen, it's a disaster waiting to happen, where people are already suffering, and then they can't get the goods and services and things they need to restore power and building materials and things to build back the bridges and all the rest of it. And so, what group would do that? What group would, this is terrorist type of activity. And so the only reason to do it is if you want to break that area, right? You just have this storm, you call it natural, you call it weather manipulation, whatever, the storm hits. And then the longshoremen just happen to be going on strike right now, and then they're also stopping the truckers from coming in. So they can't get supplies to that area when all the food's gone bad, there's grocery stores and stores are closed, and, there's just horrific stuff's going on there. It makes no sense. All right, let's go to Netanyahu here. Okay, so this can't be good. This guy's getting pretty desperate. He just appeared in front of the UN.
I speak a lot about the leaders of Iran. Yet at this pivotal moment, I want to address you, the people of Iran. I want to do so directly, without filters, without middlemen. Every day, you see a regime that subjugates you make fiery speeches about defending Lebanon, defending Gaza. Yet every day, that regime plunges our region deeper into darkness and deeper into war. Every day, their puppets...
Oh, okay, so this is... the hypocrisy here is off the charts.
...are eliminated. Ask Mohammed Def. Ask Nasrallah. There is nowhere in the Middle East Israel cannot reach. There's nowhere we will not go to protect our people and protect our country.
Because they just killed some guys, right? Straight up murdered them.
With every passing moment, the regime is bringing you, the noble Persian people, closer to the abyss. The vast majority of Iranians know their regime doesn't care a whit about them. If it did care, if it cared about you, it would stop wasting billions of dollars on futile wars across the Middle East. It would start improving your lives. Imagine if...
Okay, so Iran is no treat. The government was left there because the CIA, effed them, fucked them over by Operation Ajax, which I've talked about before. They got rid of the leader Mossadegh, who was a moderate leader, who was a businessman, and Iran was completely different than it is now. But CIA took that guy down. They placed the Shah of Iran in a puppet state. Israel's been a part of all that shit, right, with America. And Israel just sucks, right? It's just like every country sucks. Every government sucks to whatever extent. I mean, they become corrupt and evil. But Israel's problem that makes it specifically bad is that the Jewish community complains about the Holocaust and talks about the Holocaust and talks about people hating them and talks about the horrors that were done to their people. But even if you look at the Bible where God orders them to destroy all these various people in the Bible, they are treating the Palestinians the same way that they were treated in Germany during the Holocaust. So if you're going to complain about something, you're going to talk about something, use it as victim consciousness, as a way to justify your behaviors, which is what they're doing here. And then you go and just beat up on a group of people that were living there and they have, sovereign lands, and you're just going to take their houses and build developments and do everything they're doing, wipe out their children. Then you have no complaints anymore. Like, you can't say, I mean, you can because you will, but there's no truth in it, right? If you're saying you're being persecuted and you're being abused, and then you go do that same thing to some other group and say that you're justified because you need to protect yourself, right? Like, that's, and it's I mean, everything's just falling apart here. But for him to say this stuff to Iran, it's getting closer and closer to war with Iran, which is what Israel's wanted all along. And then once that happens, America's military will be involved, and they're going to use the American military's gains as a way to grab land, the greater Palestine. Like, this is what's going to happen, right? Now, here's Iran, and so America, to fight Iran, like, they're not going to fight Iran here, or they need to fight Iran here. America's going to have to occupy the Persian Gulf, and then these areas here. Of course, Iraq is already, there was the war there, and so America would have to mobilize all these, and this would also be World War III with Russia, and Israel can grab all this land that they think is owned by them. They can grab as much of it as they possibly can, which they will. They'll try to grab all this various lands because they, this is what Zionists believe. It's the promised land. And, they're going to take as much of it as they can with the, American military presence.
All the vast money the regime wasted on nuclear weapons and foreign wars were invested in your children's education and improving your health care, in building your nation's infrastructure, water, sewage, all the other things that you need.
I don't think anyone in Iran would like to listen to this guy. Like, he's going to, I mean, this is not for people of Iran. Like, this is a message for all of us. That's why we're seeing it, right?
Imagine that. But one simple thing. Iran's tyrants don't care about your future, but you do. When Iran is finally free, and that moment will come a lot sooner than people think, everything will be different.
Okay, so if you're going to do regime change, that doesn't work. Like, if the people of Iran rise up and change government, that's fine. But we already saw what happened when they screwed them over and did regime change before. No matter how bad the government is, it gets worse. It gets into a chaotic state, right? But he's saying they're trying to do regime change, that they're going to try to take out their government.
Our two ancient peoples, the Jewish people and the Persian people will finally be at peace. Our two countries, Israel and Iran, will be at peace. When that day comes,
just when their leadership, when this leadership is great here, we got to change the other leadership.
The terror network that the regime built in 5 continents will be bankrupt, dismantled. Iran will thrive as never before. Global investment, massive tourism, brilliant technological innovation based on the tremendous talents that exist inside Iran. Doesn't that sound better than endless poverty, repression, and war? From Qom to Isfahan, from Shiraz to Tabriz, there are tens of millions of good and decent people with thousands of years of history behind them.
You think that those people are psyched about what you're doing to the Palestinian people, and they're going to trust you based on your expansion, right? Your military expansion. So, you know.
And a brilliant future ahead of them. Don't let a small group of fanatic theocrats crush your hopes and your dreams. You deserve better. Your children deserve better. The entire world deserves better. I know you don't support the rapists and murderers of Hamas and Hezbollah, but your leaders do. You deserve more. The people of Iran should know Israel stands with you. May we together know a future of prosperity and peace.
Yeah, Israel stands with everybody else. They're just out there liberating from oppression by killing Palestinian babies and kids. So there's this. Okay, to add to this, my wife lost her phone, or she didn't know where her phone was. So she asked me to call it, and I went to call it, and it said my phone said it couldn't. And we then found my wife's phone, and she had the same issue. And then we realized that Verizon's network was out, and my wife just sent me a text saying that it's affecting millions of people today on Monday, September 30th. So Verizon's out, and, you know, there's all this stuff going on. And so you think about all the things I just showed you. This is all happening on Monday. You know, whenever this video is going to be up on Thursday, I'm going to cover the debate. In a bit, I have one kind of almost funny thing, not really funny in a mocking way, but, you know, election stuff. You know, that commercial I was telling people about. I'll show you that in a second. And so if you look at all these things, you know, we've been feeling kind of unsettled here. I wonder if other people are feeling unsettled. We weren't really affected so much personally by the hurricane. It's been raining here. We had a lot of wind, and you had the trees. Our neighbor's barn. We heard some crash in like sometime, you know, like 10 to 11 at night. I went outside and I looked. I couldn't see anything. But we have trees that are over garages and old buildings and things. And we have a big branch that's on our garage. It didn't do any damage. That was like months ago that happened. But I went and looked the next morning, and our neighbor's barn, and it's kind of a new barn, big, nice barn. They have horses. And I saw that a whole tree had fallen on their barn and really fucked it up. I mean, it was bad. And so, like, the top end of it is, like, I mean, the roof is, like, they're going to need a new roof on, like, half of it. And so, you know, we got a little bit affected here. A lot of people are out of power, but not so much as these other people. But the hurricane really tagged, you know, a lot of people across the country. And then there's other chaotic things that are going on. Support systems are not running. I just looked it up, and there are local news articles about how these truckers' tires were slashed. So that's a real story. Happened in Tennessee. And so this is something going on. People are just doing this anyway. There's lots of stories about slashed tires. Like, that's a thing people are doing now. And so, like, that's happening. That could just wreck people's... I mean, just, you know, all of these things. And so it just feels very unsettled. And, you know, I mean, this is 2025, 26 is when the first big event's supposed to happen in terms of the predictions and the Seismic system, the Whispers of the Brighter World. Things are, like, you know, falling apart. In all these states, like Asheville is a very liberal area. And if Joe Biden fails and these people who are going to vote for him decide not to vote, or, I mean, if this place is still not up and running, and, you know, people are going to have a lot more things to worry about than voting, then North Carolina is certainly going to go to Trump, which are already leaning towards him. Like, the majority of people in Asheville or a large number of them are going to vote for Biden. They're liberals and they're Democrats. And if he fails them, and all the things that are going on, fear and when things really affect you, when the federal government really affects you, if things are going on in the world really affects you, when you can't, when you don't have electricity, you don't have internet. Our internet's down here for no reason. It's like been spotty all day, and we now have like underground, like good internet, like finally after years of just crappy stuff. Our other internet company that hadn't yet canceled is like they lost service, and I don't know when that's going to be back up. But my point is, it just feels like things are already falling apart all the time. Like things, and then when services aren't there, you see that people are suffering, just living, their lives. It was one thing to have luxuries and to have all the stuff that we have that's unnecessary. Like if you look at 80% of your electrical use, this stuff's not for, heating up water, or heating up, using it for cooking, just cooking, or things to do with your climate in your house, things that are necessary to live, right? You can go without some of these things. You can be more moderate about them. But if you think about all the electricity that's used, all the time that you're on the internet, all the time that you're doing things that really aren't all that important, that aren't, essential. There's a lot of stuff that you could cut down if you look at it just like need-based or survival-based. Well, you could get rid of a lot of electrical use. But people that don't have any electricity at all, there's no food in their grocery stores, things like that. People are suffering from the hurricane. And then, you're going to see like a lot of this happen, disruption in services. And I don't know how many times how often it is for these truckers to get their tires slashed. But if that's happening now, you're putting people at risk, right? It's a freaking sociopathic thing to do. So if that's being done by the powers that be, they're agent provocateurs to exacerbate the situation. Well, there's a reason for that. Like they want you to realize that your lifestyle isn't guaranteed as things are going to be taken away more and more. Remember, the goal was that people will own nothing and be happy about it. Like, so what state you have to be in where you want to give up all your possessions and live in small, these smart cities with 15-minute cities? Like, who wants to take that deal other than young people who don't know any better? But the rest of us who've lived a totally different life, when you have that as your deal and then you like it, like if you're going to like it, that was what the WEF said, right? And so, everything's kind of a mess here. All right, let me show you this voting thing, and then I'll wait, till Wednesday to finish this video and get it up on Thursday.
As fans, you always show up big.
Now, it's time to show up just as big for our country.
And that starts with registering to vote.
The average time to register is literally 2 minutes. Let's get it.
Okay, so it says there at the end, it takes all of us. That's their ad, and I talked about this ad before. And so what they're saying is, it's not that hard to vote, and this is how you do it. And so you need football players that aren't known for, being brilliant. There's some, just to play the game and understand the strategy, there's got to be a high level intelligence, quarterbacks being anybody to run an offense, a defense, these complex things. But in terms of knowing about social issues, and these are young men, young people, and they're the ones to say, go out there and vote. It takes all of us. And like I said, if you got to be convinced by football players how easy it is, it only takes a couple minutes, then I'll vote. Then, your vote really your vote shouldn't be the same as people who do research and really are big into politics. And again, I'm not voting because, I feel like it's a superior attitude to understand, a superior understanding, a higher level of understanding that the system is completely rigged, right? But to those people who really are into it, are really into candidates, and they know a lot of these various topics, even if it's just mainstream knowledge, and they're really focused on voting. Voting's a big part of their life, and somebody who has to be convinced by a football player. And that's what I'm saying about how you have these 10 states, and 5 to 10,000 people in each of these states that's undecided, that's going to decide this presidency. And again, it doesn't matter who gets we're fucked either way. It's like, I mean, it's part of a plan. I don't want to say we're fucked in terms of, the system has to come down for things to get better. And that has to happen. And that's going to suck for us. But, it's better for everybody else in terms of the future and future versions of ourselves and whatever it is, right? But, that's going to be a tough time. But the system's horrible. But anyways, like, this is how they're getting people out to vote. Oh, it's not that hard. It only takes a couple of minutes. It should be hard. Like, it should be hard to vote. Like, you should have to work at it. You should really have to, want to vote. You shouldn't be pressured by celebrities and NFL players and your friends and family. If you don't really want to vote, then you really shouldn't, because you put no effort into it, right? You don't even care about it. Then, why would you vote? Anyways, we'll get into the debate. I'll cover some more stuff. I gotta wait a couple days to even start making the rest of this video. Okay, so this happened. This is the All the Smoke podcast, and they do an interview with Kamala Harris, which they consider their most important interview. These are two former basketball players, and I'll describe them in my next video. I'm going to cover this whole thing. I can't wait to watch it. I know it's not going to be great, but just, it's a clash of two different consciousnesses here. But this pertains to this video. So I want to show you this because the next thing I'll show you is highlights of the vice presidential debate. So this part here I want to show you is to do with that.
Yeah, I have a question along the mental health line. We spoke to Kobe, and I did his last interview, and I asked him, over his long career, was there any negativity or hatred or disrespect toward you that he heard and hurt? And he said, I heard it all. Yeah. And he said it all hurt. As someone who's been the first in a lot of spaces you've been in, a woman of color, knocking on the door to possibly be the next president, how do you protect your mental health and your mental space?
Well, number one rule, don't read the comments.
They're nasty. They're nasty.
I'm serious.
Yeah.
Don't read the comments. Just let's start there. I work out every morning. For me, it's just...
She's an athlete.
Mind, body, and spirit.
Mm-hmm. Is that how you work out? What exercise? How many reps of that thing you just do?
It's really important for everybody. We all have our levels of stress. Everybody does, right? Be intentional about who you have in your life.
It's like she's talking about, like, she has this air about her where she's, she did this when she was, in the debate stage, where she thinks she is a giver of wisdom. Like, she's made it, she's been successful, and she says somebody who has something inside of her worth saying. But it's all crap. It's just things that she says that she's heard from other people. Like, she's really she's empty inside, right? She talks like a person who's been to the top of the mountain, right? Somebody who's succeeded. But again, there's all these things that the right wing will drag up on her, just like the left wing drags up on Trump. Like, so they're prejudicial, and they're always looking to demean somebody and minimize their accomplishments. But I don't see her having any accomplishments. The things that she brags about, I don't think are good policies that she created as a district attorney. Of course, she got her job by, prostituting herself with a man twice her age, a 61-year-old man when she was 29. A 32-year difference, right? It was the larger difference then was between her and her mom. Her mom was 25 when she had her. And so, right? So there's, like, this guy was 6 years older than her mom, and he was having an affair with him, right? So he gave her all these, he gave her fuel for her career, gave her all these positions and things like that. And then what she did as a district attorney and a person in terms of congressional person, she doesn't have anything. It's just posturing. It's things that she could put in a book. It's things that she could use, like little policies she passed. She wrote a whole book on a program that had like 300 kids in it. And she was using this as something she wanted to have the whole nation used, having these kids who are troubled kids and who are being convicted and going to like a treatment center. Half the kids quit, so they didn't even use it. And she wanted this to be a nationwide program. And, whoever tried it, it failed. It wasn't successful. And again, this isn't me being like prejudicial. These are like facts of what happened. And she's not pushing that thing today, right? She went on she was interviewed by Matt Lauer. I showed you that. And she, she pushed this thing and it ended up being a failure. And because, she didn't care about being successful, she just wanted to write a book, right? She wanted to show that she was accomplishing things. And she doesn't have anything inside of her. But she has a position of power and she's famous. So she talks like she's made it and she has some wisdom and she has no wisdom. Like there's nothing inside of her. Just like Joe Biden plagiarizing his life and Donald Trump lying about his dad was the real, he was given all this privilege, which he blew and went bankrupt 6 times. Like these people are failures and they talk like they're knowers. They talk like they're winners when they're losers, right?
To the extent you can. And in particular for our young people who may not know that they have a right to be intentional about.
Intentional's her new word.
Do you have people in your life who applaud your success? Do you have people in your life who you trust? Do you have people in your life who, when you trip and fall, they laugh with you and then they pick you up and push you back out there? There are people that you know who will be those people if you choose to have them. I am blessed to have an incredible family and incredible friends. My best friend from kindergarten is still one of my best friends.
Yeah, we've heard that. Yeah, that friend.
That's crazy.
Right?
That's crazy. It's crazy.
Stacey Johnson.
Yeah, that's dope. I love it.
We used to go to the clubs and her father Seville.
Yeah.
The question's about mental health. And she's talking about having people around you who love you and support you. And, all the things that she says here. They have nothing to do with that. Yeah, that's great. But there's lots of people who don't have that. They don't have, they're lonely, they're miserable, they feel isolated, right? Well, I have my best friend since kindergarten, which she says all the time, and I'll cover that in a moment. I'm editing here. I just want to add this. She says that story all the time, talking about her best friend. People don't have that. Like, don't talk about how great you have it, that you have a loving spouse, and she's going to talk about Dougie Fresh. I'll get into that in the next video. All these things that she claims she has, a great family. People don't have those things. They don't have a support system. That's what these people that you're supposed to be advocating for, you're clueless about. Like, you don't talk about how great your life is when somebody asks you about the plague of mental health problems out there that young people specifically have, and all these people who are, just ready to, they're suicidal and depressed and they're on medications and they feel hopeless. All these young people during COVID. No, I you know what? I have a great family. I have great friends. I have a friend all the way back from kindergarten. Like, it's the most clueless thing you could say, right? That's not what the question is. The question is, what are you going to do as a politician to cultivate mental health, which is a big thing in sports now as well, and the depression that athletes suffer from and the mental issues they suffer from. They often, a lot of these athletes are just messed up internally, and that's why they need to succeed in this way. And it also it collapses on them when they have to retire or they fail. And so, we've heard about this, and she's giving the worst possible answer and talking about how great she has it and what keeps her going because she has such a great support system.
And so I think that's part of it, right? Because you do need the support to deal with it. And especially, people who are active on social media, it's hard
It's
out
tough.
there. It's tough. And you have to find things. Like, I love to cook. I love to cook.
She cooks. That makes her happy. That balances out.
And it's a way for me to, I think it's just, for me, it's a great gift I can give the people I love. But it's also, it's like I start out, I know what I'm going to make, and then I'm done, and I can give it to people. And it just gives me something to do. that is a productive use of time, and I think people, choose hobbies, think about what it is that you like to do that takes your mind off
away
of
from it.
the stresses, that is also productive, right?
Economy, small business.
Okay, so that wasn't the part. I got to find the other part here. Okay, so she gets into what she was going through when she picked Tim Walz, which is a whole thing because I want to cover it because we're going to get to the debate. So the original question was about mental health and what she could do, and I'll play that in my next video. Hopefully I'll remember to do that. I'm probably going to do that after I get done with this because I had a schedule, so I'm already started my next video. And I'll start off with that piece. But her answer here was about, how to cope with the haters and social media. And she says cooking, ignore the comments, these things. Well, that's not what people are doing, right? Like, she's not somebody who can give solutions. She's not a mental health expert. She's not an expert at anything. She's not a wise person. You'll see this again. I'll talk about this later as you go through this. She's not a knower. She's Kamala Neepads Harris. She got her start by prostituting herself, which I talk about, again, we'll get into this more in a bit. I've already talked about that coming up here. And so, we know how she got her start, and we know she hasn't had any successes. And so, it's like, why are you talking like you've done something? Like, you don't know anything about mental health or any of these other things. You're not a mentally healthy person because you have a fake persona that you're pushing out there, and you're just reading from a script, and that shit catches up to you, right? Okay, so it's towards the end of the video. This is the piece that ties into Tim Walz.
Generations of leaders.
First thing you do in the morning, last thing you do before you go to sleep.
First thing I do in the morning is work out.
Mm-hmm.
There is a prayer that comes in after that.
Yes, of course.
Every day.
Mm-hmm.
And
come on. You don't pray.
Last thing, usually to tell my husband I love him.
I like that.
Oh, that's all.
What's your guilty pleasure? Do you have any?
Yes. One of my guilty pleasures, especially when I'm on the road, are my Doritos.
Oh, what flavor?
Nacho. Old school, original.
OG,
Come on.
yeah. OG,
come on.
red bag.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's not food, right? That's, my wife and I have been talking about that, like things that we used to eat. That's not food. Like, it's poison. It's got seed oils and Monsanto GMO corn. I mean, all that shit, right? Horrible for you.
No, that's exactly right. That's exactly. Got to have a napkin nearby.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I love it. What was your process? Because it was fast. What was your process, and what did you do when you were deciding who to pick for your vice president?
Ultimately, what it came down to.
Okay, so this is where she's lying. Like she's trying to make up some bullshit because she doesn't have anything. Like she just can't go inside and tell you the truth. She has to come up with something. Like she just, like these politicians, they're so artificial and they're so constructed as personas. They just can't be themselves and be authentic. And if she was authentic, she would be unelectable. No one would like her or identify with her. So they're trying to make her into something she isn't, right? If she wasn't running for president, people would not like her. Like they would not hire her. They would not, who is this person? Like if she was just some expert that they rolled out there or whatever. And even an expert, you come in, oh, that's an expert on CNN, right? An expert. Like people think that these experts are better than they are. But the fact that she's running for president, it's like, oh my God, you must be successful. You must have value. You must be worth something, right? So she's given all this credit that she doesn't deserve. Same thing with Trump, same thing with every presidential candidate. And so she's just makes things up in a way that, she thinks this is what I should say, right? And she's not good at that either.
Was Tim Walz. If you look at Tim Walz and you look at me and you have a sense of who we are and where we came from, you think we have nothing in common. But
Yeah, you don't have anything in common. You don't. You're not even, you would not be friends. If you lose, you'll never talk to that motherfucker again, right? You're not, you guys aren't soulmates. You're not friends. You're not anything. You had to pick a white guy, just like Joe Biden had to pick a woman of color. This is completely a demographic pick. You're a woman of color, so you had to pick a white guy because you needed white guy votes. You needed, there's a majority of people are white. You needed a white person as your VP. the president has always been a white man. And so he's your Joe Biden, right? The way Joe Biden picked you, he's your Joe Biden. He's like very similar to Joe Biden, right? He's nothing like you. The other two guys you were going to pick both had big red flags. You really wanted Josh Shapiro because he would have delivered Pennsylvania. That was the guy that, but he was genocide Josh. He fucked it on Israel, right? And so there's just no, she was told he didn't make this decision. Like, just say I didn't make my decision. They gave me these candidates and they told me which one was the best one, and I chose that one, right? Like, she didn't even make this decision. So it's a silly question. Like, it doesn't, like, these guys don't know, but it's a silly question. How fucked would it be if she said, how great it would be also if she said, we looked at it and I had to pick an old white guy. Like, I had to. I had no choice. For me to get elected, I had to get an old white guy. And so this idea that she had something in common with this person and where he was like her, and, very few people are like her based in her upbringing. I mean, people who grow up in college towns whose parents are professors. Her dad was from Jamaican. He was Jamaican, so he's a first-generation immigrant. Her mom was an Indian, first-generation Indian immigrant. She grew up in, the Berkeley, California, which is a unique, California is a different place, and Berkeley is different. Very hyper-liberal, very hyper, all the things that she, she had an affair with a guy who was governor of the state, and it elevated her to her position. She married a guy who was a Hollywood lawyer, Dougie Fresh. I mean, she doesn't have a normal life. Like, she's, just her ethnicities makes her unique, right? And then her upbringing and her, both in terms of genetics and her socialization, she's not like most people. And to claim that she's like a guy who grew up as a closeted gay kid in Nebraska who married a crazy woman and became governor of frickin' Minnesota, and is just kind of weird. And he's a football coach and all that shit, right? They're not, they're not alike, right?
He comes from and grew up in the same kind of, different part of the country. Folks were a different color from a different culture, but same people, hardworking people, straight-talking people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is the bullshit they tried to pull at the DNC, the Democratic Convention. This has nothing to do with why you would pick the guy. You're picking somebody that you hope will help you deliver a state and win something, like a vice presidential pick that, number one, will help you, and more importantly, won't hurt you. Like, you don't want to get Sarah Palin, right? Sarah Palin came in with a lot of energy, and she ultimately fucked John McCain, right? Like her, being a Sarah Palin.
Who have values. And I just found that so familiar to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that the process was ultimately I made a decision about my gut around.
Which we'll get into in a second. Here she said this here.
But the economy is an unpredictable beast. And you are running for a job that takes extraordinary instinct and guts.
Yeah.
What's the last time you had to make a gut decision? This here is very prescribed, it's very controlled.
Yeah. Probably the biggest gut decision.
She's saying that this interview is very prescribed because she's just talking points.
I've made most recently is to choose my running mate. Yeah. There were lots of good, incredible candidates. And ultimately that came down to a gut decision.
I know I'm out of...
Okay, so she said this at the convention, right? Earlier, let's show you that video. How Kamala Harris trusted her gut and picked Tim Walz. This is from August 6th, right? And so, she was already talking about that during the convention. They use analytics and experts and people and, political analysts and all these things. And so that, they're not going to say that. So they have to come up with a story. And the story they released is she just trusted her gut. But in reality, she was given 3 candidates, and then they said, well, you can't pick either of the other 2 because they have big negatives. So she really didn't even make a choice, but they couldn't say that, right? And the people on the the pundits were all saying that. Like, this is why she had to settle for this guy. they said, all right, we got to pick a white guy, old white guy, and these are our options. This is what she went with. And so it's not really even a decision, but she's making it sound like that because they've given her these various storylines and narratives, and she has to include them in these interviews. And the woman just said, this is very contrived. When's the last time you used your gut? And she just goes back to one of the things that they've told her to say that isn't true, right? And she's just regurgitates that in different places. And it's, and unfortunately, people are so dumbed down they don't notice it. They don't notice the bullshit, right? Like people are just, the same thing with Trump. Like Trumpers can't see his bullshit, and Trump is an expert bullshitter, and they just can't see it.
Like, do you, and not that any of the other candidates didn't, but just do you have a connection to the people and a life experience that is about just seeing people? And
so, like, that's just political bullshit, right? Like, none of that's true. That she, again, the reason you pick a vice president is one, it's going to help you, but most importantly, not going to hurt you. Josh Shapiro, Genocide Josh, certainly could have helped her more because he was really popular in Pennsylvania, a very important state to her being elected. She wanted Josh Shapiro. He had way more energy, was definitely like a better person, like in terms of his presentation. More, he's a piece of shit politician, but he's more polished than Tim Walz. And there's another guy, I forget who he was, but he had some negatives. And so they already had a very controlled type of situation with her, and they didn't want to pick something where they were like, oh, that's a mistake. Like, she couldn't have a mistake because she hasn't done anything. She has no accomplishments. She didn't really do anything as vice president. And so if she makes a mistake right off the bat by picking a bad vice president, and she was already in a bad situation, right? She was behind Trump, and she was coming from the Joe Biden debacle. And so the reason she picked him would be electability. How is it going to help her with her election? None of this bullshit, but she didn't even pick him. She doesn't do any of this stuff. They tell her what to do.
But it was a whole thing. I mean,
but I heard you did some cooking. You were trying to watch a movie and couldn't focus. Like, is that your nerve? That's what I want to hear.
Well, so you want to know that part.
Give me that.
It's okay, because now he's got to make some bullshit up here.
Look, from the time that the president called me and told me he wasn't running, I mean, it just like everything was in.
She knew this for months. They knew this was a planned thing.
Speedy motion. And I was not sleeping so well. And that one morning, I had, I don't know, a few hours sleep, and I'd like to sleep. I just got up, I was like, and so
insomnia, she's, again, she wasn't great before. Having insomnia is one of the worst things. You can't function without sleep. Years ago when I went to school to get my master's in counseling, in one of the classes, the teacher was saying, these are the things the client has. Like if a client comes to you, and he listed different symptoms, like different scenarios, and he said which things you treat first. And one of the things, the person had insomnia, and then a bunch of other issues. And he said, we all said, whatever, people answered the question. And he said, you treat the insomnia first because that's life-threatening. Like insomnia, so many people suffer from it. And it's life-threatening. Like it can physically, but also, in terms of your decision-making and all the other things, right? You don't, function. Like I notice when I don't get enough sleep, it's hard for me to do this, what I'm doing. It's hard for me to think. Like I need to, if I just take a 15-minute nap, I can focus. Like, I don't have the, I'm just too tired. My brain's not working. You don't make good decisions when you have insomnia, right? And I live with people who had insomnia. They couldn't sleep. My ex and, my daughter who eventually committed suicide both were insomniacs. They couldn't sleep. They had issues sleeping. And I think it had relationship to like adrenal fatigue. But, it's one of those things when you have it, it kills you. It kills your ability to be productive. And she's going to have that whole, because she doesn't know what she's doing. Right? She doesn't deserve this. Not that any of them deserve it, but she's particularly, unqualified. So the thing is, she had a plan, right? Like they had a plan, not she had a plan. she was their plan. Like, they knew they were getting rid of Joe Biden for years. Like, they knew at some point when they elected him that he wasn't going to be able to finish out either his first term, or he wasn't going to certainly be able to do a second term. They knew it. He had Parkinson's. Like, they all knew his dementia was worse for them. And when the American people finally caught up to that, I mean, it took him forever, because when he was running, like, she knew he had dementia in the debates. Like, she was laughing at him. And so they all knew that he was not going to make it. And they came up with a plan that they didn't want to run a primary, especially since RFK Jr. could have been the nominee. Like, he was a front runner. And so I think RFK Jr. would have done well against her, and certainly Gavin Newsom, these other people. And so they already had two disastrous primaries. The previous primaries where Bernie Sanders was the winner, and they had to cheat Bernie Sanders out of his victory. They had to rig it against him. So they had a plan not to primary at all. Get rid of the democratic process. We'll wait till the last minute, and we'll say everyone's got to get behind Kamala. You know, even Democratic leaders and media people were saying they need to do some sort of primary. They can't just pick somebody like Kamala Harris. But they already did, because this was, you see how seamlessly, they did a good job of it. They didn't do a good job because they were winging it. It was a well-orchestrated plan that was timed out perfectly. And they did a good job. It's been very successful. But it's completely undemocratic, and she knew about this for whatever period of time. If she didn't know, then she's like the dumbest person ever. Like, if they didn't include her in this plan, which of course they had to. And so for her to say any of these things, like you would have been, there's a point where everyone knew Joe Biden was gone after the debate. But she knew that before the debate. Like, she knew this was going to happen. They all did. And so this idea that she was suffering insomnia, well, that's really not shocking, but really bad news. Because, like, if that causes her to have insomnia, wait till real shit's happening in the world. And she's supposed to be president, right?
I just went out and got a pork roast and started marinating.
See, time to work. Get to your happy place.
And my family happened to be in town, so they were very happy about the whole situation. But I just got up and started, everybody's asleep, I just got up and started cooking.
Set your mind at ease.
Yeah.
Last question.
Okay, so like that just, whatever it was. Let me just show you this last one, and then I'll cover this more. I'll tell you more about these two guys, and I'll cover this more in my next video. But here, let's just end here.
As someone who's broke a ton of barriers throughout your journey, and your journey is continuing to elevate, what does it mean to you to be the first woman president, but the first black woman as president?
Yeah. Well, not there yet, knock wood.
Yeah, knock wood that you're not there yet. Hopefully that doesn't happen.
My mother had many sayings, and one of them is she would say to me, Kamala, you may be the first to do many things, make sure you're not the last. And I take that so very seriously.
Oh my God. She said you're the first to do so many things. I take that so very seriously. You're certainly going to be the last. Like, if you're a woman president, there probably won't be America. Is going to be, it's already, regardless of who's president, America's done. But whoever's going to be president is going to be blamed for what happens. If it's Trump, then all the independent sort of outsiders, you never can have an outsider again. I mean, not that America's going to be so messed up, like it's going to be a different country by the end of the next 4 years, regardless of who's elected. But she's not qualified, right? So anything that she does is going to leave like a bad taste in people's mouths for somebody like her in the future, whatever she represents.
I've had the good fortune to mentor a lot of people along the way, including to this day. For me, it's about, one, understanding the shoulders I stand on. We talk about a Shirley Chisholm, and then so many people who are alive who have mentored me. And
okay, so it's just this gobbledygook. Willie Brown was her big mentor. Like, he got her started, whatever she wants to say. Of course, she's going to talk about women and women of color mentoring because it's just specific to her, fake narrative they produced here. So I'll cover this again. This podcast interests me, and I'll cover this in my next video. I want to get to the debate in just a moment, but there's a couple more things here. This one, White House believes Iran is preparing imminent ballistic missile attack against Israel. This was news this morning on Tuesday, October 1st. And I won't put this video up till Thursday, so it might have already happened by the time you're watching this, but I'll cover this in my next video, I guess. And so that's a big piece of this thing. The other thing is there is a Helene shuts down Spruce Pine, North Carolina mine that is pivotal to the world's semiconductor supply. So there was a write-up about this on Facebook, and I wanted to check it out, see if it was true. And it says, the modern economy rests on a single road in North Carolina where Helene collapsed most bridges to Spruce Pine, North Carolina. A single road runs to the two mines that are sole supplier of the quartz required for the Zagorski crucibles needed to refine silicone wafers. There are no alternative sources known globally. As of Monday morning, chip producers' worst fears have been realized as Google traffic data shows road closures around both silico mining facilities. Every crystalline silicon photic module and semiconductor chip made in the world today relies on this mining district in North Carolina. Yay. Again, like, it's just whether this is happening because they're doing it, the controllers, or whether God's doing it. You know, God is always doing it, right? And so God is always responsible. Whatever happens, God's a part of everything that happens. And so, you know, this is the collapsing of America and the world's culture. It's more and more we're taking blows, and these are just the initial sort of, you know, this is the introduction to what's coming, and it's just going to get worse because, you know, it's time for this system to collapse. All right, speaking of that, let's get to the debate here. Okay, so I was going to wait to start this coverage tomorrow, but just seems smarter that I didn't have to watch this thing twice. So this is the debate. Let's see how they started off here.
New York, America decides. The vice presidential debate.
America decides.
Good evening, I'm Nora O'Donnell, and thank you for joining us for tonight's CBS News Vice Presidential
Do they choose these Stepford wives on purpose?
debate. We want to welcome our viewers on CBS, on other networks here in the U.S. and around the world. We have a consequential night ahead, and our focus is the
It's a consequential night. It's pretty consequential tonight.
issues that matter to you, the voter. Let's introduce the candidates. Minnesota's Democratic Governor Tim Walz and Ohio's
That's this guy right here.
Republican Senator J.D. Vance.
J.D. Vance, he's over here. This guy right here. These two manly men.
Tonight, meeting for the first time.
What's her job?
I'm Margaret Brennan. In order to have a thoughtful and civil debate, these are the rules that both campaigns have agreed to.
Boom. There's the civil rules.
Questions will be directed at one candidate who will have 2 minutes to respond. The other candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for rebuttal. Then each candidate will get another minute to make further points, with an additional 1 minute each at the discretion of the moderator. The primary.
Wow, you guys got so much power with that extra minute. You guys should like make some money. This coyotes look like a pack of coyotes out there. We don't usually hear this time of year, but they're. I don't know if you guys probably can't hear them.
Of the moderators is to facilitate the debate between the candidates, enforce the rules, and provide the candidates with the opportunity to fact-check claims made by each other.
CBS News
Fact-checking. They'll be fact-checking the shit out of each other. They're going to be fact-checking.
reserves the right to mute
Actually, it's a siren, not coyotes.
the candidates' microphones to maintain decorum. We have not shared the questions or topics with the campaigns.
With the Republicans, but we...
The stage is set. Governor, Senator, thank you for joining us. Let's get started. Tonight, our country is facing several unfolding crises. The Middle East is on the brink of war. Americans are suffering from the catastrophic impact of Hurricane Helene. And now a labor strike as 25,000 dock workers from Maine to Texas are picketing.
Boy, this is feeding right into my, what I've set up for the other part of this video. Just worked out that way.
We begin tonight with the Middle East. Margaret.
Yeah, I knew this was coming. What do you got, Margaret? Come on, Margaret. Get your shit together.
Thank you, Nora. Earlier today, Iran launched its largest attack yet on Israel, but that attack failed thanks to joint U.S. and Israeli defensive action.
Lindsey Graham I was watching on one of the news things. I don't know which one. And he made a statement. He wants the Americans, and if not the Americans, Israelis, to bomb the Iranians' refineries, which would mean they couldn't produce oil anymore, which would drive up your fucking gas prices, global, whatever it is globally. And certainly people around the world would suffer on top of the Iranians as a response because he's a piece of shit, right? And that's these neocons.
President Biden has deployed more than 40,000 U.S. military personnel and assets to that region over the past year to try to prevent a regional war. Iran is weakened, but the U.S. still considers it the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and it has drastically reduced the time it would take to develop a nuclear weapon. It is down now to 1 or 2 weeks' time. Governor Walz, if you are the final voice in the Situation Room.
There goes Mr. Frowny Face. They say that Iran could get a nuclear weapon within 2 years, did she say? What was that? I'm not sure. Let's go back to that.
Largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and it has drastically reduced the time it would take to develop a nuclear weapon. It is down now to 1 or 2 weeks' time.
So they could have a nuclear weapon in 2 weeks? How would they even know?
Governor Walz, if you were the final voice in the Situation Room, would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, and thank you for those joining at home tonight. Let's keep in mind where this started. October 7th, Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,400 Israelis.
Oh my God, he's not good at this.
Israelis and took prisoners. Iran.
He's got his wife's crazy eyes. Look at him.
Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental.
That's what they always say. It's a fucking tagline. Oh, Israel gets to defend themselves. That's what they all say it too. That's what they always say.
It's hostages back, fundamental, and ending the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. But the expansion of Israel and its proxies is an absolute fundamental necessity for the United States to have the steady leadership there. You saw it experienced today, where along with our Israeli partners and our coalition, able to stop the incoming attack. But what's fundamental here is that steady leadership is going to matter. It's clear, and the world saw stage a few weeks ago, a nearly 80-year-old Trump talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this moment. But it's
it's becoming a crowd size. They don't offer any answers. The answers that Trump and J.D. Vance give suck. They're always the wrong answers, and they're always, they lie about shit and they make shit up. But these guys talk about nothing. Like it's no substance and bad substance, right? And so J.D. Vance is going to go over the top here because they're Israel's butt boys, right? They're not Netanyahu's butt buddies. Anyways.
It's not just that. It's those that were closest to Donald Trump that understand how dangerous he is when the world is this dangerous. His chief of staff, John Kelly, said that he was the most flawed human being he'd ever met. And both of his...
Come on. He's the most flawed. He's the worst person that guy ever met in his whole life.
Secretaries of Defense and his national security advisors said he should be nowhere near the White House. Now, the person closest to them, Donald Trump, said he's unfit for the highest office. That was Senator Vance. What we've seen out of Vice President Harris is we've seen steady leadership. We've seen a calmness that is able to be...
He sucks at this. He's horrible. Did he not know he couldn't debate? He sucks at it. He's that was a shot he was supposed to fire that Vance once said that Trump was unfit for office, right? He sucks. Vance is going to be better at this. I was also, there's a thing on MSNBC, I think it was, either one of those two networks, CNN or MSNBC. And the guy was saying how this guy was just basically no experience. He had He said Dan Quayle had five times more experience than he did, and he said that Sarah Palin had 6 times more experience, right? And he said that he was sort of a person who was put in there with no real anything, right? Like he was he created some fundraiser for the opioid epidemic, and it's turned out to be a scam, right? And it was like he was talking about Kamala Harris, right? Kamala Nepaz Harris, the same thing. Like everything that he said about J.D. Vance was the same thing you say about Kamala, right? And now I guess this guy as well.
Be able to draw on the coalitions to bring them together, understanding that our allies matter. When our allies see Donald Trump turn towards Vladimir Putin, turn towards North Korea, when we start to see that type of fickleness around holding the coalitions together, we will stay committed. And as the Vice President said today we will protect our forces and our allied forces, and there will be consequences.
Governor, your
Okay, so that was absolutely nothing.
time is up. Senator Vance, the same question.
Well,
Would you support
She's dead inside.
or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
So, Margaret, I want to answer the question. First of all, thanks, Governor. Thanks to CBS for hosting the debate. And thanks, most importantly, to the American people who are watching this evening and caring enough about this country to pay attention to this vice presidential debate. I want to answer the question, but I want
That's the way I'm doing it, bro. I'm straight up mocking you, MNFers.
actually give an introduction to myself a little bit because I recognize a lot of Americans don't know who either one of us are. I was raised in a working class family. My mother required food assistance for periods of her life. My
Did she? Okay, good. You're from poverty. I'm glad to know that you're from. Make sure everyone knows you're from poverty.
Mother required Social Security help to raise me, and she raised me in part because my own mother struggled with addiction for a big chunk of my early life.
Oh, good. Your mom's a crackhead. That's exactly what we wanted the president. A guy who had to be on food stamps, and mom was addicted to crack. That's good. Good news.
I went to college on the GI Bill after I enlisted in the Marine Corps and served.
He was in the military, and he went to college, and the military paid for it. By your taxpayers paid, your tax dollars paid for this guy to go to college. That's good news.
In Iraq. And so I stand here asking to be your vice president with extraordinary gratitude for this country, for the American dream that made it possible for me to live my dreams. And most importantly, I know that a lot of you are worried about the chaos in the world and the feeling that the American dream is unattainable. I want to try to convince you tonight over the next 90 minutes that if we get better leadership in the White House, if we get Donald
Trump, get rid of these motherfuckers over here, then the American dream is back on.
Back in the White House, the American dream is going to be attainable once again.
Look at this guy. Look at this crazy motherfucker right here. He's doing a lot better than I thought. He sucks. But everything he says sucks. I mean, the content, but he's definitely more polished, and he's a better speaker. Look at this guy right here. Look at this motherfucker.
Now to answer
it's like Harold in the Magic Crayon, but like evil.
Particular question, we have to remember that as much as Governor Walz just accused Donald Trump of being an agent of chaos, Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective deterrence. People were afraid of stepping out of line. Iran, which launched this attack, has received over $100 billion in unfrozen assets thanks to the Kamala Harris administration. What do they use that money for? They use it to buy weapons that they're now launching against our allies, and God forbid, potentially launching against the United States as well. Donald Trump.
Okay, so there's something my wife sent me. Let me pull that up here. Israel, my tax dollars. Iran, somehow also my tax dollars. That's just a quality frickin' beam. Just great. I mean, on every frickin' level. And so that's what Vance is alluding to. Not that the Republicans were any better. And, Iran has been done dirty by America, which neither of these MNFers is going to say. Operation Ajax, where the CIA took out a moderate leader and wrecked that country. American manipulation that's caused problems in this area, which, America's done damage all over the world by trying to manipulate people and force either puppet leadership or whatever on these sovereign governments, right? That's what evil empires do. But this is a hilarious meme.
Recognized that for people to fear the United States, you needed peace through strength. They needed to recognize that if they got out of line...
So you want everyone to fear the United States, right? That's your goal? Think about what this motherfucker just said. America's supposed to be the big bully. And like, yeah, we're the good guy and we're keeping every the bad guys down for morons who can't, look at this guy. Look at this Humpty Dumpty looking motherfucker right here. And this dude with a freaking, it's almost like they blurred this guy out.
The United States global leadership would put stability and peace back in the world. Now, you asked about a preemptive strike, Margaret, and I want to answer the question. Look, it is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. I think that's the right approach to take with the Israel question.
So you have no problem with the fucking genocide, you fucking ghoulish motherfucker, right? Of killing all those Palestinian kids and all the wrongs that have been perpetrated by you and Israel in that region. Not that the other countries are good or great. The Palestinians have no military, so they're blameless, right? They're an apartheid state.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, do you care to respond to any of the allegations?
Well, look, Donald Trump was in office. We'll sometimes hear a revisionist history, but when Donald Trump was in office, it was Donald Trump who we had a coalition of nations that had boxed Iran's nuclear program in, the inability to advance it. Donald Trump pulled that program and put nothing else in its place. So Iran is closer to a nuclear weapon than they were before because of Donald Trump's fickle leadership. And when
Donald Trump, it's his fault. It's always Donald Trump. Everything has come back to Donald Trump.
Iran shot down an American aircraft in international airspace, Donald Trump tweeted, because that's the standard diplomacy of Donald Trump. And when Iranian missiles did fall near U.S. troops and they received traumatic brain injuries, Donald Trump wrote it off as headaches. Look, our allies understand that Donald Trump is fickle. He will go to whoever has.
He's pretty fickle, that guy. Everyone says Donald Trump's fickle. This guy knows about fickle. This guy's really fickle himself. He likes to play pickleball, but not the sport. This guy likes pickleball. So does this guy. They're gonna play pickleball together later on.
Most flattery or where it makes sense to him. Steady leadership like you witnessed today, like you witnessed in April. Both Iranian attacks were repelled. Our coalition is strong, and we need the steady leadership that Kamala Harris is providing.
Senator Vance, the U.S. did have a diplomatic deal with Iran to temporarily pause parts of its nuclear program.
Okay, so they gave Iran a shit ton of money, which Iran actually deserved because of, all of it. And you know who was happy with Donald Trump killing that deal? Israel. Israel was ecstatic. In fact, they voted Donald Trump the best U.S. president ever. I mean, opinion polls over there because of it. Like, he killed that deal that Israel was against. Israel was against that deal. And not that Israel matters, as Israel sucks, but like, this is just them making up stuff here. And then she's supporting that, right, and not saying what really was, their biggest ally. They all talk about Israel and how we got to protect Israel. Israel gets to defend itself. Israel wasn't happy with that deal, which gave Iran just not only money, but a lot of other things, right? Which Iran deserves for us fucking them over back in the 60s with Operation Ajax, which CIA went in and destroyed a democratically elected president who was a moderate just because he wanted to. BP, British Petroleum, had built the oil industry there, right? And they were getting 80% of the profits, and Iran was only getting 20% of the profits of their own oil. And he wanted to split it 50-50. And because of that, the CIA destroyed him, right? Like, so that tells you everything you need to know about America and Britain and the rest of it, right?
And President Trump did exit that deal. He recently said, just 5 days ago, the U.S. must now make a diplomatic deal with Iran because the consequences are impossible. Did he make a mistake? You have 1 minute.
Well, first of all, Margaret, diplomacy is not a dirty word, but I think that's something that Governor Walz just said is quite extraordinary. You yourself just said Iran is as close to a nuclear weapon today as they have ever been. And Governor Walz, you blame Donald Trump. Who has been the vice president for the last 3.5 years? And the answer is your running mate, not mine. Donald Trump.
Kaboom. Fucking slapping this guy. He looks like that kid, Harold in the Purple Crayon, but just a side view. But also there's some other cartoon. I can't remember what it is. But look at him. He looks distressed, right? He's got that crazy wife. His face is always pulled into a frown.
Trump consistently made the world more secure. Now, we talk about what the sequence of events that led us to where we are right now, and you can't ignore October the 7th, which I appreciate Governor Walz bringing up. But when did Iran and Hamas and their proxies attack Israel? It was during the administration of Kamala Harris. So Governor Walz can criticize Donald Trump's tweets, but effective, smart diplomacy and peace through strength is how you bring stability back to a very broken world. Donald Trump has already done it once before. Ask yourself at home, when was the last time? I'm 40 years old. When was the last
Donald Trump is a piece of shit, and he's going to give Israel everything they want. And, you know, he's going to go in there, and they're going to try to destroy Iran. And it's wrong for them to do that. And, I mean, it's just wrong morally and divinely. It's just not fair, and it's not, you know, appropriate to everything that's been done there, right? But he is killing this guy in the debate. He's much better than he is, right? He's much clearer, and, you know, I don't know, he's off-putting, and people probably don't like the guy, so, I mean, this guy's Humpty Dumpty. It's hard to tell. Like, I don't know what the dopes who haven't chosen a candidate or chosen who they're going to vote for. I don't think this is going to make much of a difference either way. But, you know, he's definitely much better than he is at debating.
Last time that an American president didn't have a major conflict break out? The only answer is during the 4 years that Donald Trump was president.
Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to.
Which is true. The one good thing Donald Trump did in his first term was he stopped all those wars. And there was one, I didn't think he was going to do it. It was the one thing that I compliment Trump on. He didn't, you know, there's a lot less of those bullshit wars. He did a lot of bad things with the economy. He got worked on COVID. He did Operation Warp Speed. And he, you know, he made a mockery of the presidency, which I really enjoyed. But, you know, the truth is he definitely was not a wartime president. He didn't push for any of these wars, but now he would. Like, he's going to let Israel do whatever they want. And he's already said that, and, you know, it's going to happen.
Nora?
Margaret, thank you. Let's
What is that? Thank you.
now to Hurricane Helene. The storm could become one of the deadliest on record. More than 160 people are dead and hundreds more are missing. Scientists
100 more? Well, that's not a lot dead. I mean, I think there's been worse hurricanes in terms of that.
say climate change makes these hurricanes larger,
Okay, we're going there already. You going fucking there already?
stronger, and more deadly because of the historic rainfall. Senator Vance, according to CBS News polling, 7 in 10 Americans and more than 60% of Republicans under the age of 45 favor the
I think she's the anchor on CBS News, and they got her doing this shit, right?
U.S. taking steps to try and reduce climate change. Senator, what...
Okay, so they're not talking about the hurricanes themselves or weather modification. Of course, you're not going to talk about that. You're going right for climate change?
responsibility would the Trump administration have to try and reduce the impact of climate change? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Sure. So first of all, let's start with the hurricane because it's an unbelievable, unspeakable human tragedy. I just saw...
I bet it's Biden's fault.
Today, actually, a photograph of 2 grandparents on a roof with a 6-year-old child, and it was the last photograph ever taken of them because the roof collapsed and those innocent people lost their lives. And I'm sure Governor Walz joins me in saying our hearts go out to those innocent people, our prayers go out to them, and we want as robust and aggressive as a federal response as we can get to save as many lives as possible, and then, of course, afterwards, to help the people in those communities rebuild. I mean, these are communities that I love. Some of them I know very personally in Appalachia, all across the Southeast. They need their government to do their job, and I commit that when Donald Trump is president again, the government will put the citizens of this country first when they suffer from a disaster. Now, Nora, you asked about climate change. I think this is a very important issue. Look, a lot of people are justifiably worried about all these crazy weather patterns. I think it's important for us, first of all, to say Donald Trump and I support clean air, clean water. We want the environment to be cleaner and safer. But one of the things that I've noticed some of our Democratic friends talking a lot about is a concern about carbon emissions, this idea that carbon emissions drives all of the climate change. Well, let's just say that's true, just for the sake of argument, so we're not arguing about weird science. Let's just say that's true. Okay. Well, if you believe that, what would you want to do? The answer...
He's so hyper. Like, he's got some kind of ADHD. He's like an ADHD, grumpy old man, closeted gay dude. Like,
Is that you'd want to reshore as much American manufacturing as possible, and you'd want to produce as much energy as possible in the United States of America because we're the cleanest economy in the entire world. What have Kamala Harris's policies actually led to? More energy production in China, more manufacturing overseas, more doing business in some of the dirtiest parts of the entire world. And when I say that, I mean the amount of carbon emissions they're doing per unit of economic output. So if we actually care about getting cleaner air and cleaner water, the best thing to do is to double down and invest in American workers and the American people. And unfortunately, Kamala Harris has done exactly the opposite.
Boom. Dropping it on him. What do you got, frowny, big frowny face?
Governor Walz, you have 2 minutes to respond.
Well, we got close to an agreement because all those things are happening. Look, first of all, it is a horrific tragedy.
Just gosh darn it. God damn it. God nag it.
Hurricane. And my heart goes out to the folks that are down there in contact with the governors. I serve as co-chair of the Council of Governors as we work together on these emergency managements. Governors.
I'm a part of the theme. Just let me know. I got a position you guys never heard of before. Counselor of Governors. That thing. Look at him. Look at him go. He's learned something from Kamala Harris. Close your eyes and open your mouth.
No partisanship. They work together to all of the governors and the emergency responders are on the ground. Those happen on the front end. The federal government comes in, makes sure they're there to that we recover. But we're still in that phase where we need to make sure that they're staying there, staying focused. Now, look, coming back to the climate change issue, there's no doubt this thing roared onto the scene faster and stronger than anything we've seen.
It just came onto the scene. You remember that girl? That girl that came out, and she's got a European accent, and she said, "How dare you? I just want to go to school."
Senator Vance has said that there's a climate problem in the past. Donald Trump called it a hoax and then joked that these things would make more beachfront property to be able to invest in. What we've seen...
Oh, boom. These jokes. That's a jokes. He's going after Donald Trump's jokes.
Out of the Harris administration now, the Biden-Harris administration, is we've seen this investment. We've seen massive investments, the biggest in global history that we've seen in the Inflation Reduction Act, has created jobs all across the country. 2,000 in Jeffersonville, Ohio, taking the EV technology that we invented and making it here. 200,000 jobs across the country. The largest solar manufacturing plant in North America sits in Minnesota. But my farmers know climate change is real. They've seen 500-year droughts, 500-year floods back to back. But what they're doing
back to back. We had floods for 500 years. After a drought for 500 years, 1,000 years of bad weather. It's crazy.
It's adapting, and this has allowed them to tell me, look, I harvest corn, I harvest soybean, and I harvest wind. We are producing more natural gas and more oil at any time than we ever
you harvest a lot of wind too there, bro.
have. We're also producing more clean energy. So the solution for us is to continue to move forward that climate change is real. Reducing our impact
is real. Climate change is totally real, you guys. I don't even know why we're even talking about it so real.
Absolutely critical. But this is not a false choice. You can.
Okay, whose flag pin? Which one of these guys is wearing his flag pin better? I mean, both these guys love America so much. They wear a little fucking pin with the American flag on it because they love the flag. There are a couple of flag lovers here. And these two flag lovers with their American flags showing how patriotic they are. They wear them, like right here. They let you know, hey, I'm a patriot, see? I put on this pin and it has a flag on it.
Do that at the same time you're creating the jobs that we're seeing all across the country. That's exactly what this administration has done. We are seeing us becoming an energy superpower for the future, not just the current. And that's what absolutely makes sense. And then we start thinking about how do we mitigate these disasters?
Thank you. Senator, I want to give you an opportunity to respond there. The governor mentioned...
that's part of the rules. He gets a minute in rebuttal, and then he gets a minute in rebuttal after he gets jotting down on his notes. His flag pin is really popping there. And this guy in his eyeliner, he's going to let loose on this dude.
And that President Trump has called climate change a hoax. Do you agree?
Well, look, what the president has said is that if the Democrats, in particular Kamala Harris and her leadership, if they really believe that climate change is serious, what they would be doing is more manufacturing and more energy production in the United States of America, and that's not what they're doing. So clearly, Kamala Harris herself doesn't believe her own rhetoric on this. If she did, she would actually agree with Donald Trump's energy policies. Now, something Governor Walz said I think is important to touch upon, because when we talk about...
Look at this guy. Look at his eyes. He's one crazy motherfucker, right? I mean, this dude, like, how is he not he was born a woman, right? They've just thrown a fake beard or whatever he is, taking testosterone.
Clean energy. I think that's a slogan that often the Democrats will use here. And I'm talking, of course, about the Democratic leadership. And the real issue is that if you're spending hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars of American taxpayer money on solar panels that are made in China, number one, you're going to make the economy dirtier. We should be making more of those solar panels here in the United States of America. Some of them are
interrupted. You're interrupting. Why are you interrupting, you interrupter? Are you a Donald Trump's?
But a lot of them are being made overseas in China, especially the components that go into those solar panels. So if you really want to make the environment cleaner, you've got to invest in more energy production. We haven't built a nuclear facility, I think, one in the past 40 years.
Senator.
Natural gas, we got to invest more in it. Kamala Harris has done the opposite. That's raised energy prices and also meant that we're doing
Senator,
worse by the climate.
your time is up. Governor, would you like to respond?
Well, look, we're producing more natural gas than we ever have. There's no more.
This guy really produced a lot of natural gas, you can tell.
On that, we're producing more oil, but the folks know, and like I said again, these are not liberal folks. These are not folks that are Green New Deal folks. These are farmers that have been drought one year, massive flooding the next year. They understand that it makes sense. Look, our number one export cannot be topsoil from erosion from these massive storms. We saw it in Minnesota this summer. And thinking about how do we respond to that, we're thinking ahead on this. And what Kamala Harris has been able to do in Minnesota, we're starting to weatherproof some of these things.
No way, weatherproofing? I know she's that smart and brilliant and crafty and creative.
Structure law that was passed allows us to think about mitigation in the future.
They're making it sound like Kamala Harris, both these guys, like she's done shit. She hasn't done shit. She's just sat there. And have you ever heard of her doing anything other than the Borders Are thing? And then her cackle, like, you know, she's done nothing in 4 years, nothing of note. And all of a sudden they're both talking about her record like she's been busy. She's done nothing. Look at him go. Look at that freaking ghoul hole right there. That guy's got a massive ghoul hole.
How do we make sure that we're protecting by burying our power lines? How do we make sure that we're protecting lakefronts and things that we're seeing more and more of? But to call it a hoax and to take the oil company executives to Mar-a-Lago, say, give me money for my campaign, and I'll let you do whatever you want. We can be smarter about that.
Did that happen? You fact check him, because was you in Mar-a-Lago's?
That and an all-above energy policy is exactly what she's doing, creating those jobs right here.
Governor, your time is up. The overwhelming consensus among scientists is that the Earth's climate is warming at an unprecedented rate. Margaret?
Boom, good thing to fact check. But even though he didn't say shit, like he knew you were going to talk about, like, you guys have the facts. And you just fact-check nobody. Because he said, let's pretend, let's just assume that because we're not going to debate it, the climate change is real. And then so he didn't even go there. And you just said that anyway. Like she put a disclaimer like they do under a YouTube video, and it was totally unnecessary. But she didn't know what to do because she was expecting that when she baited him with the Donald Trump thing, that he was going to say, yeah, it is a hoax. And he wasn't going to fall for that because he's a better debater than the other guy. She didn't know what to do, so she dropped that climate change bullshit anyway.
Thank you, Nora.
Thank you, Nora. Stepford Wives number one.
To turn now to immigration. The crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border
Tim, it's coming for you and your candidate.
Consistently ranks as one of the top issues for American voters. Senator Vance.
Oh, she's coming for the cats.
Your campaign is pledging to carry out the largest mass deportation plan in American history and to use the U.S. military to do so. Could you be more specific about exactly how this will work?
Yeah, I want to hear this shit. Good question, Stepford Wives number two.
For example, would you deport parents who have entered the U.S. illegally and separate them from any of their children who
No, where are you going to put them? Like, the countries aren't taking them back. How are you going to get them back? Let's say you take 3 million people and they're going back to Venezuela and Venezuela doesn't want them. Like, what are you going to do then? Like, that's what I want to hear about. Explain how this fucking mass deportation is going to work, because it can't. It's just shit that Trump's throwing up against the wall, like saying that there's no tax on overtime.
Born on U.S. soil. You have 2 minutes.
So first of all, Margaret, before we talk about deportations, we have to stop the bleeding. We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies. 94 executive orders suspending deportations, decriminalizing illegal aliens, massively increasing the asylum fraud that exists in our system. That has opened the floodgates. And what it's meant is that a lot of fentanyl is coming into our country. I had a mother who struggled with opioid addiction and has
Oh my God! And we already heard about his mom. I mean, this guy is on food stamps. His mom was an addict. She's sucking boop for money. I mean, just like Kamala did. I mean, it's a whole mess over there.
And clean. I don't.
And and Vance and this guy will do it for free.
People who are struggling with addiction to be deprived.
I mean, the other guy, Vance, would do it for free.
To their second chance because Kamala Harris let in fentanyl into our communities at record levels. So
was it Kamala? Where was it Joe Magoo?
Leading. You've got to re-implement Donald Trump's border policies, build the wall, re-implement deportations. And that gets me to your point, Margaret, about what do we actually do? So we've got 25 million illegal aliens who are here in the country. What do we do with them? I think the first thing that we do is we start with the criminal migrants. About 1 million of those people have committed some form of crime in addition to crossing the border illegally.
Boom. Look at this guy. Look at him. He's a busy little bee, like a hamster over there on a wheel, jotting shit down.
I think you start with deportations on those folks. And then I think you make it harder for illegal aliens to undercut the wages of American workers. A lot of people will go home if they can't work for less than minimum wage in our own country. And by the way, that'll be really good for our workers who just want to earn a fair wage for doing a good day's work. And the final.
Yeah, there's no. American businesses need illegal aliens. There's plenty of work for them, right? And so they're not going anywhere. This is going to be a part of America. There's jobs Americans won't fucking do. Americans aren't going to pick vegetables and fruits and things like that. Some of these labor jobs, they're just not. Americans won't do them, right? For the money that they're offering. That's why there's always been immigration in America. People who are in desperate straits. People who are, in such horrible situations wherever they are in their world, that doing crappy American jobs is much better lifestyle for them, right?
Final point, Margaret, is you ask about family separation. Right now in this country, Margaret, we have 320,000 children that the Department of Homeland Security has effectively lost. Some of them have been sex trafficked. Some of them hopefully are at homes with their families, used as drug trafficking mules. The real family separation policy.
I don't know if this happened live or it's just the one of the feed I'm watching, but there's interference. Look at this sad dude. Dude, it's so sad. Bro, what's wrong, bro?
In this country is unfortunately Kamala Harris's wide open southern border. And I'd ask myself.
Exactly. Everybody knows about Kamala Harris's wide open southern border. How do you think she got where she is today?
Fellow Americans to remember, when she came into office, she said she was going to do this. Real leadership would be saying, you know what, I screwed up. We're going to go back to Donald Trump's border policies. I wish that she would do that. It would be good for all of us.
Okay, you better bring up the motherfucking cats, because that thing was now been determined a hoax. This guy lied to his teeth about that. I want to hear the cats.
Governor, do you care to respond to any of those specific allegations, including that the vice president is, quote, letting in fentanyl and using kids as drug mules, among other things regarding children?
The drug
She wants him to fact check them.
is not true, but I will say about the fentanyl, because this is a crisis of this, the opioid crisis. And the good news on this is the last 12 months saw the largest decrease in opioid deaths in our nation's history.
In our nation. Our nation is doing great.
% decrease in Ohio, but there's still more work to do. But let's go back to this on immigration. Kamala Harris was the Attorney General of the largest state and a border state in California.
Did she prosecute? I bet she prosecuted drug cartels.
Only person in this race who prosecuted transnational gangs for human trafficking and drug interventions.
Boom! I nailed it. Like I knew that was coming. I don't know how I got that.
But look,
because I only heard it 100 fucking times before.
We all want to solve this. Most of us want to solve this. And that is the United States Congress. That's the Border Patrol agents. That's the Chamber of Commerce. That's most Americans out here. That's why we had the fairest and the toughest bill on immigration that this nation's seen.
And I bet Donald Trump killed it.
It was crafted by a conservative senator from Oklahoma, James Lankford. I know him. He's super conservative, but he's a man of principle, wants to get it done. Democrats and Republicans worked on this piece of legislation. The Border Patrol said, this is what we need in here. These are the experts. And the Chamber of Commerce and the Wall Street Journal said, pass this thing. Kamala Harris helped get there. 1,500 new border agents, detection for drugs, DOJ money to speed up these the adjudications on this, just what America wants. But as soon as I was getting ready to pass and actually tackle this,
who did it? Who was responsible for killing such a wonderful bill? Could it be Donald J. Trump's?
Donald Trump said no.
No way. I didn't see that coming.
To vote against it because it gives him a campaign issue. It gives him
boom. So that you guys did again with the dude. Kamala Harris has been teaching you well. Again with the blaming Trump. It happened 3.5 years after Biden was president, right? Like it would just have passed this, whatever it was, like this past 6 months ago.
What would Donald Trump talk about if we actually did some of these things? And they need to be done by the legislature. You can't just do this through the executive branch. So look, we have the options to do this. Donald Trump had 4 years. He had 4 years to do this. And he promised you, America, how easy it would be. I'll build you a big, beautiful wall, and Mexico will pay for it. Less than 2% of that wall got built, and Mexico didn't pay a dime. But
they didn't? Why did they, fucking deadbeats? Why did they pay for the wall that Trump was making them pay for? Why did they pay for the wall? It's just totally unfair. No wonder it's only 2%.
Here we are again, 9 years after he came down that escalator, dehumanizing people and telling him what he was going to do. As far as the deportation plan, at one point, Senator Vance said it was so unworkable to be laughable. So that's where we're at. Pass the bill, she'll sign it.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, the question was, will you separate parents from their children, even if
you didn't even talk about the deportation other than saying you deport the criminals.
Kids are U.S. citizens? You have 1 minute.
Margaret, my point is that we already have massive child separations thanks to Kamala Harris's open border. And I didn't accuse Kamala Harris of inviting drug mules. I said that she enabled the Mexican drug cartels to operate freely in this country. And we know that they use children.
Why'd you shake your head like you just agree? Look at him. You just agree. Let's see if I go back just a tad here. Here we go.
Of inviting drug mules. I said that she enabled the Mexican drug cartels to operate freely in this country, and we know that they use.
Why did you just agree with them?
Children as drug mules.
He's like, that's a fair point.
And it is a disgrace, and it has to stop. Look, I think what Tim said just doesn't pass the smell test. For 3 years, Kamala Harris went out bragging that she was going to undo Donald Trump's border policy. She did exactly that. We had a record number of illegal crossings. We had a record number of fentanyl coming into our country. And now that she's running for president, or a few months before, she says that somehow she got religion and cared a lot about a piece of legislation. The only thing that she did when she became the vice president, when she became the appointed border czar, was to undo 94 Donald Trump executive actions that opened the border. This problem is leading to massive problems in the United States of America. Parents who can't afford health care, schools that are overwhelmed. It's got to stop, and it will when Donald Trump is president again.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, what about our CBS News polling, which does show that a majority of Americans, more than 50%, support mass deportations?
Look, we fix this issue.
Yeah, because they're fucking morons. There's no way, you can't deport them anywhere. You're just going to push them past the Mexican border? Most of the people aren't from Mexico. I mean, all these people are from, and some of the people aren't even from South America or Central America. Like, they're coming in through that border. So if you take all those people, you can't just, Mexico doesn't want them, right? Like, you just can't dump them over there. Like, you know, they're not going to go through immigration. But you're going to stick them back through illegal. You're going to have, like, American coyotes smuggle them back over the border. And then what happens? They'll just come right back, right? Like, you know, I mean, it's like, you know, what are you going to do? I want to hear how it's going to fucking work, right?
With a bill that is necessary. But the issue on this is what happens when you don't want to solve it. You demonize it. And we saw this. And Senator Vance, and it surprises me on this, talking about and saying, I will create stories to bring attention to this. That vilified a large number of people who were here legally in the community of Springfield.
Good, thanks God, the cast things.
Republican governor said, it's not true, don't do it. There's consequences for this. There's consequences. We could come together. Senator Langford did it. We could
Yeah, okay, dude, you fucking made up shit about the cats, and I know you feel like a piece of shit because it's too stupid for even you to get involved in. Like, he's much smarter than Trump. But Trump ran with the story when there was no story. And so did a bunch of dumbasses in the truth community that posted shit about this too, and they demonized all these Haitian people unfairly, right? And a lot of people still believe that they're eating the pets, right? Like, just dumb shit like that. The dumb shit you guys say is just, you got to stop. Look at him. This is the look of a guy who says dumb shit.
Come together and solve this if we didn't let Donald Trump continue to make it an issue. And the consequences in Springfield were the governor had to send state law enforcement to escort kindergartners to school. I believe Senator Vance...
Thank God he's talking about this, but he sucks. He just sucks so bad at debating.
...wants to solve this, but by standing with Donald Trump and not working together to find a solution, it becomes a talking point. And when it becomes a talking point like this, we dehumanize and villainize other human beings.
Tim,
Governor, your time is up. Senator, I'll give you 1 minute, but let me just ask you the question first. The governor has made the point, and I think as a sitting lawmaker, you know that Congress controls the purse strings and any funding. So you have said repeatedly that Donald Trump would, through executive action, solve this. Do you disagree that Congress controls the purse strings and would need to support many of the changes that you would actually want to implement? You have 1 minute.
Look, Margaret, first of all, the gross majority of what we need to do at the southern border is just...
You know, Margaret, you're just about to talk about the cats, and you had to bring up this other shit, Margaret.
Empowering law enforcement to do their job. I've been to the southern border more than our borders are. Kamala Harris has been, and it's actually heartbreaking because the Border Patrol agents, they just want to be empowered to do their job. Of course, additional resources would help, but most of this is about the president and the vice president empowering our law enforcement to say, if you try to come across the border illegally, you've got to stay in Mexico, you've got to go back through proper channels. Now, Governor Walz brought up the community of Springfield, and he's very worried about the things that I've said in Springfield. Look, in Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country, you've got schools that are overwhelmed. You've got hospitals that are overwhelmed.
Okay, but you made up shit about the people there eating dogs, and you didn't say that a bunch of these people were here legally, the majority of them, and that they needed workers there. It was a place where all these people left. They closed down a plant, and they had jobs that were available for people who were desperate immigrants that locals wouldn't do. And so Haitians told other Haitians about it, and they all moved there, right? And the community has been relatively, it's just a few things that were posted, and they made a big deal about this thing, right? That wasn't nearly as bad as you made it sound. And you asked the town manager, the governor, whoever it was, you called them, and they said, no, that's not happening. It's not happening. They're not eating pets. And you went and you ran with it anyway because you're a piece of shit, right?
You've got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans for scarce homes. The people that I'm most worried about in Springfield.
Okay, so what happened was it was like 80,000 people lived there, and 20,000 people left when they closed some factory or whatever. And they had jobs that were available, but the locals wouldn't do it, or they didn't have enough people to do it. And so they had an influx of immigrants, right? I thought they were just dumped there by the federal government, but then this is the story that they were saying, which seemed to be corroborated by all the people that were there. And Donald Trump just makes up stuff. Like some woman posted on Facebook, one of her friends said she missed her cats, and she said it must be those Haitians, which is kind of racist, and she probably should have been, or the comment should have been erased. She later came out and said the woman found her cat, and she made a mistake by saying it was the Haitians because she was wrong, but didn't stop Donald Trump from taking something that was not even like a rumor or an idea someone had on Facebook and turning it into a national scandal. Look at him. Look at this guy. Just something wrong with this guy. Look at his frickin' mouth. I've never seen a guy frown more than this guy.
Ohio are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace, Tim. And I actually think, I agree with you. I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does.
Senator, your time is up. Governor.
Boom. Way to be friends with Tim. and shit on his boss.
You have 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, well, it is law enforcement that asked for the bill. They helped craft it. They're the ones that supported it. That's because they know we need to do this. Look, this issue of continuing to bring this up, of not dealing with it, of blaming migrants for everything. On housing, we could talk a little bit about Wall Street speculators buying up housing and making them less affordable, but it becomes a blame. Look, this bill also gives the money necessary to adjudicate. I agree. It should not take 7 years for an asylum claim to be done. This bill
Exactly, too long. It's just too freaking long.
Gets it done in 90 days.
90 days it does. That's the bill is just amazing. It cuts through all that fucking red tape that causes an asylum request, instead of taking 7 years, it only takes 90 days now. It's amazing how it does that. Like you pass a bill and a law, and all of a sudden, 6 years it disappears. These people waiting for 6 years for asylum all of a sudden disappears because of the bill.
Then you start to make a difference in this, and you start to adhere to what we know, American principles. Look, I don't talk about my faith a lot, but
but I am. Today I am. I have faith in something. I'm going to. All of a sudden I have it now that I'm running for vice president.
Matthew 25:40 talks about, to the least amongst us you do unto me. I think that's true of most Americans. They simply want order to it. This bill does it. It's funded. It's supported by the people who do it. And it lets us keep our dignity about how we treat other people.
Kaboom. Hey, Matthew.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify,
Quoting Matthew, dropping Matthew quotes.
for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected.
Boom. Well, this is going to dispute that.
Nora?
But
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important
We're
because
going to turn now to the
debate-
economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
the rules were that
The
you guys weren't
economy,
going to
we're-
fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris.
Look at him right here. He doesn't know what to do. What's up with fucking Tim Walz?
Open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That is the facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by
Thank
our
you,
own
Senator, for
leadership.
describing the legal process. We have so much to
Boom,
get
this is
to.
getting good. I was hoping for this kind of stuff.
Thank you, Senator.
Those
We have
laws
so
have been on
much-
the books since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Wait, you guys lost control, Stepford wives. So go out and grab a whip and whip these guys into fucking shape. Don't allow them just to talk free. You guys are controlling the minutes over here. They just stole minutes out of your night.
One app has not been on the
He's
books.
mansplaining you. Don't let him mansplain to you, bitch.
It's since 1990. It's something that
Cut off their mics.
Gentlemen, the audience can't hear you because your mics are cut.
You cut off your mics. Tell them, Margaret.
So much we want to get to. Thank you for explaining the legal process. Nora.
Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you, Margaret. I bet they hate each other. And she's the anchor. I don't know why she's doing this debate. Like, she's like the main person on CBS News, I think. And I don't know why. Like, the other anchors, like Walter Cronkite, maybe back then, I don't know. But lately it hasn't been like anchors. They have like reporters that do this.
The economy is a top concern for voters. Each of your campaigns has released an economic plan, so let's talk about the specifics. Governor Walz, Vice President Harris unveiled a plan that includes billions in tax credits for manufacturing, housing, and a renewed child tax credit. The Wharton School says your proposals will increase the nation's deficit by $1.2 trillion.
Oh, fuck, bro. Oh, boom. She's laying it on you. Your plan would... They're not going to do that plan. It's a fucking $1 trillion, $1.2 trillion. Bro, what are you going to say to that? This is the last thing I'm going to watch here.
How would you pay for that without ballooning the deficit? Governor, I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. And Kamala Harris and I do believe in the middle class because that's where we come from. We both grew up in that. We understand.
Okay, yeah, we heard this shit before. Stop.
And so those of you out there listening tonight, you're hearing a lot of stuff back and forth, and it's good. It's healthy. That's what this is supposed to happen. You should be listening. How's this going to impact me? The bold forward plan that Kamala Harris put out there is talking about this housing issue. The one thing is there's 3 million new houses proposed under this plan with down payment assistance on the front end to get you in a house. A house is much more than just an asset to be traded somewhere. It's foundational to where you're at.
It's a house. It's a home. A house really is a home.
And then making sure that the things you buy every day, whether they be prescription drugs or other things, that there's fairness in that. Look, the $35.
There's not going to be fairness in $1.2 trillion being added to the deficit, which will increase inflation. She asked a question, butthole. How are you going to pay for it? You can't. You're just one of these bullshit proposals, the same thing that Donald Trump does. Make up shit you can't do. Promise things that you can't deliver on.
Insulin is a good thing, but it costs $5 to make insulin. They were charging $800 before this law went into effect. As far as the housing goes, I've seen it in Minnesota. 12% more houses in Minneapolis. Prices went down on rent 4%. It's working. And then making sure
it's working.
Tax cuts go to the middle class. $6,000 child tax credit. We have one in Minnesota. Reduces childhood poverty by 1/3. We save money in the long run, and we do the right thing for families. And then getting businesses off the ground. The law as it stands right now.
All that shit costs money. How are you going to pay for it? We're already fucking record deficits, right? How are you going to pay for it, bro? That was the question.
Now is $5,000 tax credit for small business, increasing that to $50,000. Now, this is a philosophical difference between us. Donald Trump made a promise, and I'll give you this. He kept it.
Did he say is about giving tax cuts to the wealthiest people?
He took folks to Mar-a-Lago, said, you're rich as hell, I'm going to give you a tax cut.
Exactly. I knew it was coming. Like you guys, I'm like psychic.
The tax cuts that predominantly went to the top class. What happened there was an $8 trillion increase in the national debt, the largest ever. Now he's proposing a 20% consumption or sales tax on everything we bring in. Everyone agrees, including businesses, it would be destabilizing it, it would increase inflation and potentially lead to a recession. Look, this is simple for you.
I don't want to hear this shit. I'm going to have to fact check you, bro.
Kamala Harris has said to do the things she wants to do, we'll just ask the wealthiest to pay their fair share. When you do that, our system works best, more people are participating in it, and folks have the things that they need.
Senator, I want to give you a moment to respond on that. But similarly, the Wharton School has done an analysis of the Trump plan and says it would increase the nation's deficit by $5.8 trillion.
Oh, fuck. You fucked them. I thought you were going to be fair and balanced here, but you fucked them.
My question is the same for you. How do you pay for all that without ballooning the deficit? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, you're going to hear a lot.
Trump's plan is a lot more expensive than the Kamala plan, is what I'm hearing.
From Tim Walz this evening, and you just heard it in the answer. A lot of what Kamala Harris proposes to do, and some of it, I'll be honest with you, it even sounds pretty good. Here's what you won't hear, is that Kamala Harris has already done it. Because she's been the vice president for 3.5 years. She had the opportunity to enact all of these great policies, and what she's actually done instead is drive the cost of food higher by 25%, drive the cost of housing higher by about 60%, open the American southern border and make middle-class life unaffordable for a large number of Americans. If Kamala Harris has such great plans for how to address middle-class problems, then she ought to do them now.
What the fuck could he be possibly writing here?
Not when asking for a promotion, but in the job the American people gave her 3.5 years ago. And the fact that she isn't tells you a lot about how much you can trust her actual plans. Now, Donald Trump's economic plan is not just a plan, but it's also a record. A lot of those same economists attack Donald Trump's plans, and they have PhDs, but they don't have common sense. And
they got book smarts. They don't have street smarts.
Don't have wisdom, because Donald Trump's economic policies delivered the highest take-home pay in a generation in this country, 1.5% inflation, and to boot, peace and security all over the world.
To boot.
When people say that Donald Trump's economic plan doesn't make sense, I say look at the record. He delivered rising take-home pay for American workers.
Fuck you. I say fuck you.
workers. Now, Tim admirably admits that they want to undo the Trump tax cuts. But if you look at what was so different about Donald Trump's tax cuts, even from previous Republican tax cut plans, is that a lot of those resources went to giving more take-home pay to middle-class and working-class Americans. It was passed in 2017, and you saw an American economic boom unlike we've seen in a generation in this country. That is a record that I'm proud to run on, and we're going to get back to that common sense wisdom so that you can afford to live the American dream again. I know a lot of you.
All right, okay, I just can't do it anymore. It's all bullshit, right? Because neither one can really. I mean, we know that what Trump presidency looks like. I mean, you can delude yourselves and pretend it was good, you Trumpers, but it wasn't. And we know what Biden presidency looks like, and Kamala Harris is Biden 2.0 because her people are Biden people, right? And so either way, we're fucked, right? I'm going to end here, and I'll wrap this thing up. Okay, today is Wednesday, October 2nd. I'm going to put this video up today. Just a lot of content, 3 hours video, and, you know, usually I give 2 days between videos, but I'll put this up at sometime tonight. Look at Tim Walz's expression, though, bro. I didn't notice this, but he has, like, there's just something wrong with the guy. Like, he has this worried, you know, whatever it is. So, yeah, there's that. But there's two things I saw last night on this that just tells you everything you need to know about the media's coverage. Okay, so this is, I searched for the debate. I didn't want to watch all the news afterwards. And so this is what they said. One was smooth, the other won. Rachel Maddow at MSNBC panel reacts to the vice presidential debate. One was smooth, but the other one won. There she is, the crazy one.
Wouldn't describe them as evenly matched because they are so different?
No, he sucked. He's fucking weird. He came off weird. The guy who was calling the other guy weird. And he is weird. J.D. Vance is definitely weird. There's something off about him. But he was much more polished, and he didn't get sucked into all the fact-checking. I mean, he did call on the fact-checking, but that was like a positive moment for him. But, like, he didn't get into all the stuff that baited him, all the stuff they wanted him to say, Trump stuff. And Tim Walz came off just weird, and his weird facial expressions. And it was hard to understand. He didn't make sense. You know, these things.
So different in style and so different on substance. Very interested to hear from the spin room, to hear from all of my colleagues here, to get to all.
Yeah, the spin room. That you're going to try to spin this, because what we saw there was this guy was much smarter and better debater. He was clearly much better. And Tim Walz was not. Like, and they're going to talk about their, you know, their bullshit, you know, what they call facts.
The analysis that we're going to get to. I think the big picture takeaway from this is that one of these candidates is much slicker than the other, is a much more practiced, kind of professional debate style speaker. And
he won.
The other candidate won. There was.
Of course he did. Your candidate. That's crazy that your candidate was going to win no matter what. It's just weird how you guys are such winners over there. Like, when people look at you, they go, hey, there's a bunch of winners. And they always pick the winning side. And, you know, Tim Walz was weird. And he was hard to understand. I don't think this is going to affect the election very much. But, you know, because it usually doesn't. But the other guy, J.D. Vance, was a much better debater, which you just admitted, which means he won. Because if you see two people and they're having a debate, it's the one who wins. Like, if you're saying one guy looked like he knew how to debate, and the other guy won. One guy looked like he was very competent at debating, but the other guy won.
There's one bad moment for Tim Walz in this debate where he got mixed up and embarrassed in answering a question about exactly what month he had been in China in relation to the Tiananmen Square protest. But then on guns, on January 6th, on Obamacare, on the economy, on blaming everything on the border, back again on health care.
Why is January 6th being brought up in the presidential debate, a vice presidential debate? You know, they brought it up at Trump's first debate, right? And they brought it up again at the second debate with Kamala. And so it's clearly there to embarrass Trump, right? And it's about him not, I mean, this is something where it's not a fair debate if they keep on bringing something up that's already been talked about more than people want to hear about. Like, American people are over it. It's not an issue that's decided the election for the people who are undecided. It's not an issue that people are thinking about right now. Like, they're thinking about their personal things. And there are obviously enough people who are over it who would consider voting for Trump. The people who are still thinking about that are already not voting for Trump, right? And they're not, and that's not their primary reason at this point. And so, like, why would they bring that up? They bring that up constantly. We didn't see the China thing. Maybe I should just go look at that when we're done with this little whatever's going on here.
On abortion, on every issue.
Okay, let's go to somebody else. See what she has to say. She's the worst.
Short straw. Short straw.
So I think that J.D. Vance spent the night sort of building an intricate and beautiful fort out of toothpicks. And it was perfect. And at the end, he sneezed on it. The whole thing fell apart, and he had to walk out of that room over the broken toothpicks. I think that God bless the people who watched the whole thing and stayed locked in on it. I checked in with about 20 people all who do this and watch this for a living, and they were kind of in and out of some parts of it.
Okay, we'll go to the end of the debate. We'll look for the other thing there.
On healthcare, on the sort of basic of like the tax cuts and who you're fighting for. Again, these are, the Mike Pence thing, right? So it's like, wait, what?
Okay, let's go to this guy here.
That Trump lost the election in 2020,
in that moment,
unable to say it.
In the moment, I think everything that he did for 88 minutes was lost and wiped out by that one inability to tell the truth in front of a huge television audience.
Chris,
that moment was the moment of the night. I mean, it's like, wait, why is he here? Oh, right, the Mike Pence thing, right? So that was the moment of the night. J.D. Vance is very good at this, right? I mean, this is what he's been doing since he was in college and Yale Law. It's like talking to libs and being kind of like, well, I sort of agree with you here, but here's the other part of this. Like, and he did that all perfectly fine. I thought, Walz on the substance.
He did a better job. He was a better debater. So, like, hands down, he did it. And you guys this is, again, she already said it was spin.
Particularly on healthcare, was very, very strong on healthcare, on the sort of basic of like the tax cuts and who you're fighting for. Again, these are meat and potato core messages.
Meat and potatoes.
Two moments that I think kind of broke me a little bit. And I don't know about the median information level of the viewer. The level of gaslighting to say that Donald Trump saved the ACA.
Yes, he saved Obamacare.
Like, really got up on national television.
Yeah.
And said that Donald Trump had saved Obamacare.
In a bipartisan way.
So what's worse about this than CNN? CNN puts pseudo-Republicans on their thing, right? They have Republicans, which I covered last time. These guys are all liberals. They get it. Here's Joy Reid.
Can use to come in and get a certain kind of visa. That was launched in 2020 under, drumroll, Donald Trump. He says that he never supported a national abortion ban. I have here a printout.
She's got the facts. She's got them. They're fact checking them. And here we got to go to the guy here. Here, this is the guy.
Doesn't answer. His technique is to not answer. It makes him, by the way, the very first vice presidential candidate in history who doesn't know who won the election. That's his place in this transition.
Where did you see this job listing?
But so
Boy, they're really cracking each other up with their bad jokes. And so
Republicans already in office?
It came at the end of a long list of questions that he simply didn't answer.
Yeah, because the reason he didn't answer is because, well, I'll talk about this at the end. What this is about is that they believe that they have the facts on their side. That's what this is all. The mainstream media that nobody watches anymore because people don't believe them. And the government and the intelligence community, they say, all right, these are the facts, right? And the one thing that the internet has done is saying, fuck you, those are not the facts. You're liars, and that's not true. And we don't agree on your authority. That's what I talk about here. That's what the truth community is. We don't agree on your authority. Your authority is not valid here. We don't believe that you guys are, bringing truth to any situation. Like this is a spin room. Even here, they're spinning. You guys are, coming up with a premise that in this case, Donald Trump should not be president, and then everything that you do generates whatever news you generate comes from that initial intention. And so whatever you got to do, whatever you have to do to lie and cheat and steal to make sure Donald Trump isn't president comes from that place, right? And, more importantly for us as truthers, because Donald Trump's a piece of shit liar too, and so is J.D. Vance and the whole, right wing and Fox News, is that everything you guys say has an agenda behind it, and none of that agenda is bringing the truth to the American people. It's to keep a system that should have died and collapsed years ago going. And so it's all based in that. And that you're force feeding this. I mean, talk about gaslighting, right? That's all you guys do. You guys are professional gaslighters for stupid people. Like, you're going to lose the other people and the internet. They'll get their information from other sources. And then, the truth is just loaded with disinformation at that point, right? Everything is debatable. But in reality, J.D. Vance was a better debater. He simply debates better. So there's that. All right, let me go find the end. I'll go to the end of the thing, and I'll find the part where he flubs it.
You said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska.
Okay, so that there'll be no lies coming. I mean, we already know because they've talked about it. You grew up in small rural Nebraska where you didn't know about time and space and telling the truth, where they know it in Nebraska and tell us the fucking truth. So you guys got to give me a break.
Town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard.
You're proud of that? You're proud of the fact that you were born in a town and to white privilege, right? White Nebraska privilege.
At 17, worked on family farms, and then I used the GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that.
Okay, so that other stuff means nothing, right? Look, this is the face of a guy who's just pleading for just, I'm sorry, I'm a lying piece of shit.
Back home, and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to
Why
China.
China? Like, why of all places? China is just like the worst. It is everybody that I've heard talk about it say it's just horrible there. I mean, outside of, like if you like the big cities, and of course there's beautiful places in China, but the pollution and the corruption and just all of it, right? It's miserable. It's just, it's like a whole thing. You know what? There was a couple who was from France. And that when I was in Chennai, India, they were there with their kids. They were homeschooling a woman, and she remarried. And they had sold their house and were renting it out like an Airbnb. And they had like 9 rooms in the house. And they were in India when their house had been converted into something to make money. And this woman, and she had kind of a heavy French accent, but she said that she had so many issues with Chinese tourists. Like just, they were, like this was just the whole thing. Now, again, I don't have any, this is not like, bashing Chinese people, but the country is under, one of the kind of worst governments, and, there's no God allowed, and, the one-child policy they had for years and all these things. And the pollution there and the corruption. And so it's one of the tougher places to go, right? There's places like, you don't go to vacation in Iran, right? Like there's places where, okay, let's not go there because it's risky and it's just bad. So why did he pick China of all places? I mean, do you have some kind of ties there? Is he owned by, what is, China is going to usurp America economically, and if it hasn't already, and China, is looking at that top spot. and pushing for it. And of course, everything to do with COVID. And so this guy's got a connection to China, which people should explore. I don't need to because I'm not voting and I don't care, and they're all corrupt and all these things. But it's an odd place to be. That's all. Where's your go-to place? Like, you could say at least Hilaria Baldwin, her family's go-to place was some Mallorca, Spain, or wherever it is. It's like beautiful there. It's like wonderful. It's where people go to vacation, right? I go to India because it's the spirituality there is like unmatched. But it's not a vacation spot. I mean, it's a beautiful place in India, but you wouldn't go there for like it's not tropical. It's not like going to Hawaii or Florida, like or closer. It's not like going to some tropical island or some beautiful oceanfront place, or going into the mountains. Or there's places that are just they're vacation spots, right? We have great places in America, and so why China, bro?
The issue for that was to try and learn. Now look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect. And I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that. Those same people.
Wait a minute. You're a knucklehead at times? Like, what the fuck are you talking about, bro? You're a knucklehead at times? You lied about it because Tiananmen Square was a big thing that happened. And people who were around watching it, were watching the coverage and just all of it that happened. It was a big thing. It was a big thing in America. Big thing for the Chinese people. There's a tennis player that named Michael Chang, who was a Chinese, there was a great 30 for 30 I just watched on ESPN called American Son. And it featured this guy, it was about Michael Chang. And he won the French Open, and it was an extraordinary victory. Like, he beat Ivan Lendl, who was the #1 tennis player, and I kind of remembered it, like when I used to watch tennis. And his legs just had given out. Like, it was a great coverage, the way they developed the story. And he won while Tiananmen Square was going on. And it talked about the prejudice he faced as being Chinese and, in the tennis world. Just a really good. It was called American Son, if I didn't say that already. But he was born, in America. This guy, but he was connection to China, and he was a huge hero. Went over there, and so Tiananmen Square was like big here in America. It was a big thing. Like, I wasn't watching the news at the time, but he would remember it. Like, he would remember if he was there at the time. But he makes up shit. Like, this guy's really happy. Because he gets caught lying all the time and saying I'm a knucklehead at times. No, you just make things up to show that you're a kind of person that you're really not. I'm proud of where I'm from. I'm from Nebraska. 400 people there. Yeah, you lied. Like, just admit you fucking lied. Like, this is your handling. You're being caught lying, right? And you do it all the time. And you're weird about it.
Elected me to Congress for 12 years. And in Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people, working on things like farm bills that we got done, working on veterans benefits. And then the people of Minnesota were able to elect me to governor twice. So look, my commitment has been from the beginning to make sure that I'm there for the people, to make sure that I get this right. I will say more than anything, many times.
He's watching him squirm and he's happy. You're squirming, bro, and it's your face expressions. It's like you're a tortured soul, bro. Whatever's going on with his face.
I will talk a lot.
Like, you look at crazy eyes.
I will get caught up in the rhetoric. But being there, the impact it made, the difference it made in my life, I learned a lot about China. I hear the critiques of this. I would make the case that Donald Trump should have come on one of those trips with us. I guarantee you he wouldn't be.
Okay, so I should have said this because I knew it would happen. Somehow he threw Donald Trump into this thing. Like, he got caught lying.
Praising Xi Jinping about COVID, and I guarantee you he wouldn't start a trade war that he ends up losing. So this is about trying to understand the world. It's about trying to do the best you can for your community, and then it's putting yourself out there and letting your folks understand what it is. My commitment, whether it be through teaching, which I was good at, or whether it was being a good soldier.
You were good at I was good at it. I was good at it. I was a good teacher. I was good at my teacher. I was a teacher. I was teaching. That's good.
Or was being a good member of Congress. Those are the things.
I was a good member of Congress. I was just good at everything. I'm good at going to China. I'm good at lying about it. I'm doing a good job now. I'm a good debater. I'm doing a good job. Like everyone's saying, like you guys are looking at me going, I'm good.
I think are the values that people care about.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this is I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said.
So you lied. That was just like, yeah, it was brutal. I mean, it's so bad MSNBC had to call you out on it. Those fucking shills over there had to call you out on it.
So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
No, you lied. Misspoke. You keep on misspeaking. I misspoke. No, you're saying you were a place where you fucking weren't. There's different kinds of lies. And the kind of lies that Joe Biden told about plagiarizing is about creating you're doing it to create like a narrative about yourself, right? And that's what him and Kamala Harris are doing, like her lying about working at McDonald's. These are, we're all good folksy people from America. We do folksy things. But I also go to China and I was, involved in things like that. I was there for this big event. It's like when Brian Williams lied about being shot at in a helicopter. It's specifically, not saying what happened in events that unfolded in your life, which is a fucked up thing to do. Like, I was at a place I wasn't, right? And he gets caught lying like this all the time and saying you misspoke. Just say you lied about it. I wanted to be, I was bragging, whatever it is, just like you did. You just brag now about being a good teacher and being a good congressman. All right, let's go to the end of the thing here. I just want to add one thing to hear this. All these politicians, they're bullshitters, right? They have a little Donald Trump in them. Donald Trump is a big bragger, and, they're all politicians are like that, too. Donald Trump is just over the top. It bothers them because he can say things and get away with things that they can't, although he's called on it a lot more than they are. But they always lie and bullshit and pretend to do things and be, whatever it is. They're constantly putting out their resume, their exaggerated resume, and minimizing the things that they've done wrong and these things. And it's just, they've wrecked politics because of that, right? Because of, like, finger fucking all these, with gotcha questions and the news media over the years and all these things, even now, even more so with the truth community. Nobody gets away with anything, right? You'd be better off just coming out and admitting you're a piece of shit. Like, I would vote for a person who said, yeah, I'm a piece of shit. I would totally vote. I don't care what that person's policies are. I don't care what they are. And, what party, what anything they believe. It's just that they admit that they were a piece of shit. Yeah, I'm a lying piece of shit, right? Just that alone, I would come out and vote. Like, just for saying, yeah, get rid of all these things where you're trying to get me because, it's what I say here, right? Like, I say that all the time. Like, people leave comments, and I'm like, I'm already telling you that, like, I meditate, and I'm working on myself spiritually, and I know the flaws that I have, right? I already know that I'm a piece of shit. So, like, it's irrelevant for you to try to tell me that I'm a piece of shit, right? Because I'm not trying to tell you I'm not. Like, you're predicating your comments on me saying that I'm not a piece of shit, right? And, when I talk about that, I mean in the way that we're all flawed at a human level and our selfish thoughts and our egotistical behaviors and all these things, right? And so if you just admitted that instead of going through all this other bullshit, but, people would come out and do it in a fake way. And then everyone else would copy it. It's just, you're really being sincere about it. But anyways, let's get to the end here. Okay, here are the Stepford wives again. Look at this Stepford wife here. Like, just, anyways, let's wrap this thing up here.
Vance won the virtual coin toss and elected to go last. So, Governor Walz, you are
a virtual coin toss.
First, you have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, Senator Vance. Thank you to CBS News. And most
I'm all folksy. We're not all combative like Trump. We're pretty folksy over here. We just like people like ride our bikes out and all these things.
Importantly, thank you to all of you. If you're still up and the folks who miss Dancing with Our Stars, I appreciate it. But look.
Oh, fuck, bro.
The support of the democracy matters. It matters that you're here.
And, pretty much everybody can tape shit now, right? Or you could watch it like some other way.
And I'm as surprised as anybody of this coalition that Kamala Harris has built, from Bernie Sanders to Dick Cheney to Taylor Swift, and a whole bunch of folks in between there. And they don't all agree on everything, but they are truly optimistic people. They believe in a positive future of this country.
Okay, there's no like they're all fucked. Everyone who thinks that this is gonna end well. I mean, you could be there's delusional thinking, but I mean, I think the best that you could hope for, all the people who are Make America Great Again, they're fucked in the head, and all the people who are optimistic about Kamala Harris, they're fucked in the head, right? You're talking about people who are fucked in the head. The best you could hope for is things stay kind of the same and only get a little bit worse. I mean, things are getting worse. It's just like how much of your lifestyle you're going to lose, how much is going to change, what's America's status going to be. It's all going down. Like, this is what happens. It's an empire that's collapsing. And you have to be like completely delusional to think you're not going to get hit a little bit, right? Like, this is where, let's say you had, $1 million in retirement money and inflation is coming and you realize, oh my God, I thought it was going to be set, right? But now with inflation and, how many years you're going to make and whatever, and you say, all right, well, we'll cut back, right? Or, somebody gets laid off. Both people are working and the wife gets laid off, say. And you're like, all right, we'll cut back a little bit. But things aren't going to be the same, right? You might have some hope or whatever, but things are going to get worse. And they are. Like, it's just how bad it is. It's like you're waiting for the bill, right? And the bill is going to be bad, but you'll know how bad.
One where our politics can be better than it is. And I have to tell you, that better than it is the sense of optimism that there can be an opportunity economy that works for everyone, not just to get by, but to get ahead. And
okay, yeah, we've heard this shit before.
Idea that freedom really means something. Not the freedom of government to be in your bedroom or exam room, but the freedom for you to make choices about yourself. Now, look, we all know who Donald Trump is. He's told us, and as Maya Angelou said, believe him when he told you that. His first inaugural address talked about American carnage, and then he spent 4 years trying to maybe do that. Senator Vance tonight made it clear he will stand with Donald Trump's agenda.
He did. And I had that line already written into this closing argument, but it did happen. I predicted it. He did do that.
He will continue to push down that road. Excuse me. Kamala Harris gives us a different option. Now, I'll have to tell you.
No, she doesn't. She gives you a Joe Biden, but kind of like crazy and weird and, knee pads and all the rest.
Be careful about the quotes, but there's one that Senator Vance said that does resonate with me. He said, Donald Trump makes the people I care about afraid. A lot of America feels that way. We don't need to be afraid. Franklin Roosevelt was right. All we have to fear is fear itself. Kamala Harris.
No, you got to fear the collapse of, I mean, you could fear it or not. Like, you don't have to fear anything. But, don't pretend like everything's going to go great if Kamala's president. We've seen a Kamala Harris presidency. It's called Joe Biden presidency. She has the same people and handlers. She doesn't have her own things. She just wants to be in power. It's clear that she doesn't care about anything. She doesn't have a dogma. She doesn't have anything internally guiding her, a moral compass. She wants whatever the people who tell her this is what you should do, tell her to do. And just like Joe Biden, because he was senile.
Bringing us a new way forward. She's bringing us a politics of joy. She's bringing real solutions for the middle class, and she's centering you at the heart of that. All the while asking.
The politics of joy is about her laugh. Her laugh that doesn't make other people joyful. Like, it's her having a laugh, an appropriate laugh, a crazy cackle. That's like a witch. Like, it's not politics of joy. It's a witch-like cackle.
Everyone, join this movement. Make your voices heard. Let's look for a new day where everybody gets that opportunity and everybody gets a chance to thrive. I humbly ask for your vote on November 5th for Kamala Harris.
Governor Walz, thank you. Senator Vance, your closing statement.
Well, I want to thank Governor Walz, you folks at CBS, and of course the American people for tuning in this evening. And one of the issues we didn't talk about was energy. And I remember when I was being raised by my grandmother, when she...
Oh, he's folksy too. And was it in Nebraska? No, it was in Ohio. Just the heart of America.
We didn't have enough money to turn on the heat some nights because Ohio gets pretty cold at night.
And so it's cold in the winter. It is cold. People know that who live there. OHIO.
His money was often very tight. And I believe, as a person who wants to be your next vice president, that we are a rich and prosperous enough country where every American, whether they're rich or poor, ought to be able to turn on their heat in the middle of a cold winter night. That's gotten more difficult thanks to Kamala Harris's energy policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford a nice meal for your family. That's gotten harder because of Kamala Harris's policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford to buy a house. You ought to be able to live in safe neighborhoods. You ought to not have your
It's going to be Kamala's fault again.
He's flooded with fentanyl, and that too has gotten harder with Kamala because of Kamala.
It's just all Kamala's fault. I didn't see this coming either.
Harris's policies. Now, I've been in politics long enough to do what Kamala Harris does when she stands before the American people and says that on day one, she's going to work on all these challenges I just listed. She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. Day one was 1,400 days ago.
Well, it's a lot of days.
And her policies have made these problems worse. Now, I believe that we have the most beautiful country in the world.
It is. He believes it. It's just so much more beautiful than any of some of those other countries are just like pieces of shit compared to our country.
People on the campaign trail who can't afford food, but have the grace and generosity to ask me how I'm doing and to tell me they're praying for my family. What that has taught me is that we have the greatest country, the most beautiful country, the most incredible people anywhere in the world.
Okay, stop with it. It's the same old bullshit. That's like, that's not true. Americans are horrible. I mean, given, our lifestyle and all the great things, the entitlement, just all of it. I mean, just go on the internet. Americans are horrible people.
But they're not going to be able to achieve their full dreams with the broken leadership that we have in Washington. They're not going to...
Okay, so this guy just sucks to listen to. I'm going to go back, see if I can find the question about January 6th. Okay, so they're going to do the January 6th exchange, and I want to end here because I have something to say about this. I want to show you this part last because it ties into what the pundits were spinning here.
Governor, thank you. We need to move on. Nora?
Let's talk about the state of democracy, the top issue for Americans after the economy and inflation. After the 2020 election, President Trump's campaign and others filed 62 lawsuits contesting the results. Judges, including those appointed by President Trump and other Republican presidents, looked at the evidence and said there was no widespread fraud. The governors of every state in the nation, Republicans and Democrats, certified the 2020 election results and sent a legal slate of electors to Congress for January 6th. Senator Vance, you have said you would not have certified the last presidential election and would have asked the states to submit alternative electors. That has been called unconstitutional and illegal. Would you again seek to challenge this year's election results, even if every governor certifies the results? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Okay, so just her bias in her question. Now, I'm assuming they didn't ask a question to Tim Walz about Kamala Harris and her propping up a guy that America says has dementia for at least since January. 70% of Americans say this guy's unfit mentally. But they all know he's unfit for all. I mean, Kamala Harris knew in the debates, right? And so I'm assuming there was no question about that. And the fact that they waited, because when the American people said, fuck this guy, he's got dementia back in January, and even before that, like he was falling off his bike, people were saying, this guy, we're not going to vote for him. The polls were dismal, they were abysmal. I mean, just like not electable polls for a long time. His approval rating, all of it was down. And so the Democratic Party could have opened up a primary, but they didn't. They kicked RFK Jr., which should be a question. Like if these guys were real reporters, they kicked RFK Jr. to the curb and said, no, you're not a Democrat, and you can't primary. They wouldn't let him primary. They wouldn't let him register in states. The DNC worked so that he had to leave the party. And censored him. Like they went to these social media giants and pressured them not to allow Kennedy and other people to say certain things about Biden. And so all of that was that they could have primaried Joe Biden based in what was happening. But they waited. They waited to the last minute. They knew they were going to get rid of the guy. It's obvious. And they waited to the last minute. And so Kamala Harris did not go through a democratic process. She didn't get nominated. Joe Biden did. And so that's a blow to democracy. As much as Trump did, whatever you could say Trump did about the election. Of course, there was the mail-in ballots. That was a whole new thing that Pennsylvania was still figuring out how it was going to do it and was in chaos a month before the election. And so, of course, there was going to be problems with that, right? And, whether they cheated or not, there's no, you can say there's proof or whatever that is, right? I mean, people on the right say there's proof. People on the left say there's no proof. I haven't looked at the direct evidence. It's what other people have found, right? But there was definitely issues with that process. It was something that should have been questioned, and was the fact that Trump won the night of the election, and then somehow he didn't win afterwards, the way it went down, and so it wasn't clean. And to pretend it was just this great election, and that there was no call for doubt when there was the HBO documentary called Kill Chain, which was about Democrats saying that Trump was going to rig the election. It had to do with hacking the electronic voting system, amongst other things. And so Nancy Klobuchar and other prominent Democrats were saying, we should really be worried about this next election. Trump's going to try to hack it. But then the opposite happened, right? And so you can't say that this was clean, right? And you can't say that Democrats have been good at elections because they rigged the primaries against Bernie Sanders twice before this thing that they did here, right? And then they rigged it against RFK Jr. So they're not the party of clean democracy.
Well, Nora, first of all, I think that we're focused on the future. We need to figure out how to solve the inflation crisis caused by Kamala Harris's policies, make housing affordable, make groceries affordable, and that's what we're focused on. But I want to answer your question because you did ask it. Look, what President Trump has said is that there were problems in 2020, and my own belief is that we should fight about those issues, debate those issues peacefully in the public square, and that's all I've said, and that's all that Donald Trump has said. Remember, he said that on January the 6th, the protesters ought to protest peacefully. And on January the 20th, what happened? Joe Biden became the president. Donald Trump left the White House. And now, of course, unfortunately, we have all of the negative policies that have come from the Harris-Biden administration. I believe that we actually do have a threat to democracy in this country, but unfortunately, it's not the threat to democracy that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz want to talk about. It is the threat of censorship. It's Americans casting aside lifelong friendships because of disagreements over politics. It's big technology companies silencing their fellow citizens, and it's Kamala Harris saying
that was Trump's fault. Like, if Trump hadn't acted like a buffoon, I mean, they're going to do this anyway, but they pushed for this, right? The left is trying to censor anyway, but Trump made it easier based on what he did. Like, he fucked us all with that. Like that's where you take responsibility for Trump being a buffoon, right?
That rather than debate and persuade her fellow Americans, she'd like to censor people who engage in misinformation. I think that is a much bigger threat to democracy than anything that we've seen in this country in the last 4 years, in the last 40 years. Now, I'm really proud, especially given that I was raised by two lifelong blue-collar Democrats, to have the endorsement of Bobby Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, lifelong leaders in the Democratic coalition. And of course, they don't agree with me and Donald Trump on every issue. We don't have to agree on every issue. But we're united behind a...
Like, just what are you worried about, bro? What's wrong? Why do you have so much anxiety?
Basic American First Amendment principle that we ought to debate our differences. We ought to argue about them. We ought to try to persuade our fellow Americans. Kamala Harris is engaged in censorship at an industrial scale. She did it during COVID. She's done it over a number of other issues. And that, to me, is a much bigger threat to democracy than what Donald Trump said when he said that protesters should peacefully protest on January the 6th.
Governor?
Well, I've enjoyed tonight's debate, and I think there was a lot of commonality here. And I'm sympathetic to misspeaking on things, and I think I might have with the senator. But
Me too, man.
There's one. There's one.
Me too. We're both a couple of bullshitters. We both lie all the time.
No, that
Me
this
too,
one
man.
is troubling to me, and I say that because I think we need to tell the story. Donald Trump refused to acknowledge this, and the fact is that I don't think we can be the frog in the pot and let the boiling water go up. He was very clear. I mean, he lost this election, and he said he did. 140 police officers were beaten at the Capitol that day, some with the American flag, several later died. And it wasn't just in there. In Minnesota, a group gathered on the state capitol grounds in St. Paul and said, we're marching to the governor's residence and there may be casualties. The only person there was my son and his dog, who was rushed out crying by state police.
My son, I was a victim. We were victims of Trump.
That issue, and Mike Pence standing there as they were chanting, hang Mike Pence. Mike Pence made the right decision. So, Senator, it was adjudicated over and over and over.
He said, hang Mike Pence. No one wants to hang Mike Pence.
Worked with kids long enough to know, and I said as a football coach, sometimes you really want to win, but the democracy is bigger than winning an election. You shake hands, and then you try and do everything you can to help the other side win. That's what was at stake here. Now, the thing I'm most concerned about is the idea that imprisoning your political opponents, already laying the groundwork for people not accepting this. And a president's words matter.
They matter, those president's words.
President's words matter.
They matter.
People hear that. So I think this issue of settling our differences at the ballot box, shaking hands when we lose, being honest about it, but to deny what happened on January 6th, the first time in American history that a president or anyone tried to overturn a fair election and the peaceful transfer of power. And here we are 4 years later in the same boat. I will tell you this, that when this is over...
So you guys love January 6th, the media and the Democratic Party. You know how we know they love it? Because they talk about it fucking constantly. You know, I have the whole Big Lie compilation, right? The Big Lie. You know, there's the talking points and the spin. And if something happens and you talk about it all the time, you wanted it to happen. You're glad it happened, right? Like they bring it up in they're going to bring it up in every debate from, you know, whatever. Anybody who's a Trump supporter, they'll bring this up forever. But they don't bring up the fact that they rigged the elections or the primaries with Bernie Sanders, which is, you know, the DNC head, Donna Brazile, said that. Like, she said, yeah, they rigged it. Like she said, you know, in a book she wrote, right? And so, like, that comes from somebody who's an insider of the Democratic Party, and she admitted to it. They rigged this for Kamala Harris by waiting and not primarying Joe Biden. Because if they primary Joe Biden, they would have no chance of winning. It would be such a divided party. So they waited, and they had this, you know, this package, and they did a great job. It's much smoother than anything the Democratic Party has done in years. And they got Kamala Harris to be, you know, at least on the level in terms of Donald Trump's, in terms of, you know, possibly winning this election from where Joe Biden was after that debate. And so they threw that guy under the bus. They didn't, you know, they wanted him to have a bad debate. They wanted him to act that way because he's, you know, had more lucid moments since then, right? And now Kamala Harris is, you know, an unelected candidate. Well, a candidate that didn't get any votes, right? And so
we need to shake hands this election, and the winner needs to be the winner. This has got to stop. It's tearing our country apart.
Margaret?
Senator Vance, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, well, look, Tim, first of all, it's really rich for Democratic leaders to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power on January the 20th, as we have done for 250 years in this country. We are going to shake hands after this debate and after this election. And of course, I hope that we win, and I think we're going to win. But if Tim Walz is the next vice president, he'll have my prayers, he'll have my best wishes, and he'll have my help whenever he wants it.
I appreciate that. You're a decent guy.
You have to remember.
I'm sorry I called you weird so many times. And, you know, like my wife isn't weird. I'm not weird, but you're weird. But, yeah, you know, you're decent. Thanks, guys. Thanks for your prayers, though.
For years in this country, Democrats protested the results of elections. Hillary Clinton in 2016 said that Donald Trump had the election stolen by Vladimir Putin because the Russians bought like $500,000 worth of Facebook ads. This has been going on for a long time. And if we want to say that we need to respect the results of the election, I'm on board. But if we want to say, as Tim Walz is saying, that this is just a problem that Republicans have had, I don't buy that.
Governor.
January 6th was not Facebook ads. And I think
it was horrible. It was not Facebook ads. It was the worst day in American history. Like that guy was dressed up, the QB shaman. those clowns running around the Capitol Hill. Those guys. I mean, those guys were really organized, and they were gonna take the usurp. They were insurrectionists.
Revisionist history on this. Look, I don't understand how we got to this point. But the issue was that happened. Donald Trump can do it. And all of us say there's no place for this. It has massive repercussions. This idea that there's censorship to stop people from threatening to kill someone, threatening to do something, that's not censorship.
There's censorship for everything, bro. You lying piece of shit. Look at the crazy eyes. Look at that crazy motherfucker right there.
Is book banning. We've seen that. We've seen that brought up. I just think for everyone tonight, and I'm going to thank Senator Vance. I think this is the conversation they want to hear. And I think there's a lot of agreement. But this is one that we are miles apart on. This was a threat to our democracy.
Oh, my God. No, it wasn't. Well, explain how that was. What would have happened, right? There's no, those people who engaged insurrectionists, as you call them, they had no organization. They ran in. There's some evidence that they were let in, that they were invited in, that they didn't, break in. They didn't storm the Capitol, whatever. And you guys have benefited from this tremendously. It's something you love, like I already said. But what would have happened afterwards? Let's say that they killed some of the, Nancy Pelosi or some of these people. They would have been arrested and tried, and it would have been even worse for Donald Trump, and everything would have went back to normal. They weren't going to take over the government. It's a building. The government is much more than a building. And we have an extensive law enforcement and or National Guard and or military. And so these were a bunch of, for the most part, they were unarmed because you can't bring, Washington, D.C. is like a gun-free zone, right? There's a guy who, Adam versus the man. He was kind of I don't know what he does now. He's kind of but he was like a truther, kind of a clown. And he went into Washington, D.C. and shot a shotgun straight up in the air on video. And then they put him in jail. And he came back and his stuff was like wrecked. Like he had a studio and like all the people that he would work for him just looted him. And so they arrested him. You can't bring arms like those, you can't bring arms to the loaded guns and just certainly discharge them in Washington, D.C. They have strict gun laws. And so these were unarmed people that went in there, and they had no chance of holding that building. They would have been wiped out if there was any casualties. Like, no one was under real threat. If they had killed Nancy Pelosi, they would all be dead. Or there would be, it would be a nightmare for them. This wasn't like some kind of, these guys seized the Capitol building with organized armed men who were what they would call terrorists. These were a bunch of dopes, moronic Cubies and Republican idiots who went up there and, they were running around the Capitol building like morons, right? These weren't criminal masterminds, right? There was no threat to democracy here. Maybe there was some personal threat, possibly, but they didn't get to any of those people. How come there wasn't one? There was no policeman died. The only people who died were some of them, right? The cops shot this girl, this veteran and things. But other than that, it wasn't bad like they say it was, right? It was stupid. It was like something that hurt Donald Trump and all of us in the truth community, certainly all the Cubies and all the morons out there. It was a win for the Democrats.
Way that we had not seen. And it manifested itself because of Donald Trump's inability to say. He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 20?
Why don't you ask, does Kamala Harris win the primary? Did Joe Biden legitimately win the primary? Did Hillary Clinton legitimately win the primary? Like, you're missing opportunities. I mean, he's the best debater of the four of them. But still, they just don't ever get it, right?
2020 COVID situation.
That is a damning non-answer.
Has she? It's a damning.
It's damning non-answer.
Non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were problems in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further. But you guys attack us for not believing in democracy. The most sacred right under the United States democracy is the First Amendment. You yourself have said there's no First Amendment right to misinformation. Kamala Harris wants to use the power of government and big tech to silence people from speaking their minds. That is a threat to democracy that will long outlive this present political moment. I would like Democrats and Republicans to both reject censorship. Let's persuade.
Okay, so they all suck. Let me move over to a voiceover here. Okay, so I looked it up, and I didn't think I would find it. I'd search for it, and if somebody watched the whole debate, said that there is a question that they asked, which was about how Kamala Harris was nominated without going through the electoral process, and how long did they know that Joe Biden had. I mean, they're not even talking about Joe Biden's dementia. Remember how big a deal it was after the debate and all of it. And, the Democratic leadership said he was unfit for, and now he's still president, right? The Democratic leadership forced him out. And they're not talking about that. None of it. It's like disappeared, like it doesn't exist. And an undemocratic thing happened where Kamala Harris wasn't primary. She didn't win she didn't win any votes. She didn't win any states. She didn't go through an electoral process, which I've already explained, right? And so the reason why I wanted to close with the so-called big lie, the whole January 6th thing, and then all these other things that MSNBC was saying, is that, and I alluded to this a little bit earlier, that right now it's a battle of who gets to say what the truth is. Like, that's what the truth community has brought about here, where there now is people who say that they're the ones who are in control of the facts. They're the authority. This is about who's the authority. And all of us in the truth community, and even the sucky truthers, the right-wing truthers, the woke people on the left, right, all the people who don't agree with the official story, which is, over 60% of the people, are like, fuck you. You guys are no longer the arbiters of truth. And we don't watch the news. I mean, I watch the news to mock it, but we don't watch the news to, get information. I mean, some of it's true. Like I said, they're not going to lie about everything. But we have to watch everything with the read the ingredients type of attitude and see through the bullshit. If you're going to see, the official story, like, you have to know what the official story is. I mean, you don't really have to. You could go just, ignore it all. But, I mean, if you're going to engage in this, whatever opinion-based stuff like I do here, you got to at least know what the official story is. But they can never say what our versions are. Like, they have to distort our versions. Like, I can say exactly what they believe. In fact, I predicted all the things they were going to say throughout this debate. Like, and if I didn't predict it, I knew it. I just didn't say anything. Like, I know exactly what they're going to say when the question's asked. Once in a while, there's some little nuance, but it's nothing huge. They have their talking points. They have their worldview. And we know what Trump's worldview is, and we know how he's going to act, and we know what the Democrats and the mainstream media and Kamala Harris are going to do and how they're going to act. And we know what Kamala Harris's story is, and they've just been repeating the same story, even though they've been caught lying about things or things that don't work, and they haven't been asked any really tough questions about any of the stuff that they've done wrong, and the media is just ignoring the fact that we have a guy with dementia in the White House, right? And so, like, this is where we are as a country, and I'm grateful that I don't have to engage with these people. Like, I would never, go on CNN or any of these things. I would never be a part of that, whatever that is, any of it. MSNBC, Fox, any of it, right? Like, they live in a different, like, dimension than I do. And I don't want to cross over and go down to their level because it's a lower level of dimension where they, They've created this imaginary, very boring and very, oblivious world where Donald Trump says that he can make America great again, and where Kamala Harris can bring joy into politics. Like, and both of them saying that there's this false optimism, right? Things are going really bad, and but it's all Donald Trump's fault, and we get rid of him, and things will be great. Well, Donald Trump wasn't, other than him being the center of the news for the last, 3.5 years, he wasn't the president, and things have gone south since then, right? There's been a lot of shit that's happened that didn't happen when Trump was president. And then, of course, the COVID thing, which did happen when Trump was president, which fucked Trump and screwed the rest of us by his incompetence and his inability to be truthful. They're both dishonest pieces of shit, all of them, the Trump and Kamala and their vice presidents and their teams and their whole thing. And they're telling you things that aren't true and creating false hope when we can see the system is collapsing, and they should be preparing you for that, but they're not. Anyways, let me wrap this one up here. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paravato, definitely reporting from the Apocalypse and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.